but concluded with a nice reception thanks to Skyward. I think everyone enjoyed it, even though we were very tired. But today there is still a very important session that I'm looking forward to hear. Is related to standardization. So of course, very interesting to me as I'm in the standardization sector. So I'm very pleased to have here SCTC Cable and the Study Group 9 chairman, as well as my colleague Simao, and of course I'm going to give the floor to David Wood. That will be our moderator. Thank you. I forgot to mention DVB. Sorry.
Oh, sorry, yes. Please don't forget DVB, Peter McCavick on my left here. Good morning, everybody. I'm David Wood. I'm a consultant to the European Broadcasting Union, but I have some roles in the ITU R as well. I think you can find all the biographies on the web, so if you don't mind, I probably won't go too much into the biographies of the speaker, but I'm sure you all agree that the core activity of the ITU, or the core activities, are standardization and development. And this morning we are looking at the issue of international standards for cable TV, what is being done and what should be done. And we'll have our session this morning, and then after coffee we'll have a kind of a conclusion session where we try to pull together all of the suggestions that have been made. And you may have seen that there is a background paper available on the future of cable TV, which is available on the web. I hope you had a chance to read that, because we'll be drawing on that for the session after the coffee break. So please have a look at that, and you'll find some questions in it. And after the coffee break, we will try to answer those questions. For this morning, though, we're looking at different key standardization bodies, what they're doing, what they think should be done. And, of course, perhaps the most important one in the ITU's context is ITU-T Study Group 9, which has a relatively new chairman, Satoshi Miyagi. And I'd like to ask our secretary to give him the floor, so we have his presentation. So then I'll ask our keynote for this morning, Satoshi Miyagi, to
It's happening.
Maybe you could see what's on Swiss television. No, just joking.
No, what's happening is basically I can't find my mouse right now.
You need this mouse, the one.
No, have you started on the clicker? No.
No.
Do you need this?
Don't start on the clicker yet.
Oh, the mouse has disappeared from the screen. I know that all too well. Yeah.
The mouse has disappeared big time, but we'll find a way.
It wouldn't help to use that. Would it help to use this one?
No, I don't think so. You can try clicking, but I don't think it does.
Okay, what do I do? Click here or something?
Okay, I need help here. See, the mouse is gone.
You can project it.
The mouse is gone from here. I need just to click on this to put it go.
I should be able to put Shift F5.
Shift F5.
Okay. There you are. Wonderful. Wonderful. Right. Here you are. Please, you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for coming this workshop of the future cable television, as well as I'd like to thank also the participants joining to the ITU-T Study Group 9 meeting. So, taking this opportunity, I would like to today present the topic of the ITU-T Study Group 9 and the future of the cable television. So today, my presentation contains two agendas. One is a brief analysis of the cable TV market situation from the aspect of the television broadcasting as well as the broadband access network by cable TV network. And based on such analysis, I will foresee the future of cable television and the relationship to the ITT Study Group 9. And then followed by my introduction of ITT Study Group 9, containing the brief history of the Study Group 9. And I'd like to introduce the structure of ITT Study Group 9 and our key missions. And then I'll introduce the current work program of Study Group 9. So let me start with the current cable TV market situation. So I'm not a think tank analyst. So my analysis is very brief and general, but I would like to firstly address the number of global TV households. So this chart shows the number of TV households in the world in 2010, 2016, and 2021. The legend is shown at the bottom of this slide, and please look at the orange portion for analog cable TV and the red part for the digital cable TV. So as you see on the screen, the number of households using the cable TV is still increasing in the forecast of the 2021. And also we can see that cable TV has a significant share, almost approximately 35% within the entire TV household. And also we should note that the pink portion, which indicate the digital terrestrial TV or DTT, is rapidly increasing from 2010, 2016 to 2021. But this increase made mainly by the developing countries, because in most the developed countries, digital TV is already introduced by 2011 or 12, something like that. And next slide shows the pay TV subscriber increase by each regions. The left-hand side is comparison in Asia between 2016 and 2021, followed by the Eastern Europe, Latin America, Middle East and Africa, North America, and Western Europe. And there will be the big cable TV net addition between the 2016 and 2021 in Asian countries, which may be driven by the mainly China and India and many developing countries in Asia. And also we will see the big increase in Latin America and Middle East and African countries in terms of cable TV subscribers. But if you look at the North American situation, it is expected that the number of subscribers of cable TV will be decreasing in coming years. Such decreasing will be affected by the deployment of the OTT. So the next slide shows the trying to compare the increase of the cable TV subscription versus the Netflix growth by regions. So if we look at the region surrounded by the red line, I mean the Latin America, North America, and Western Europe, we can see that the increase of Netflix is larger than the cable TV growth in those three regions. So this means there is a fierce competition between the OTT and the cable TV operators. On the other hand, in Asia and Eastern Europe and the Middle East and Africa, the cable TV increase is more than the OTT increase. So this means the cable TV is still strong in those regions, and we need to accelerate the cable TV growth and expansion in those regions, as well as the other three regions in Americas and Western Europe. So sometimes some people saying that cable TV is going to die by the cord cutting, but if you look at this kind of statistics, cable TV will have a long life toward the future, and we have still opportunity to grow up the cable TV business in the world. So in terms of the cable TV as broadband access networks, we can see the still cable TV growth for the such broadband access network. The orange portion means the cable modem, the number of users of cable modems. Red part shows the fiber to the home users, and the blue indicate the DSL users, respectively. DSL is rapidly decreasing instead of the rapid increase of the fiber to the home and the cable modems. Yeah, the growth speed of the cable modem is lower than the fiber to the home, but please note that the cable TV broadband access is still growing, and cable TV broadband access is still in the important, significant position within the broadband access network methodology. And also, I would like to note that the cable modem can provide the gigabit class broadband internet by introducing the DOCSIS 3.0 and the DOCSIS 3.1. So I've just made a brief analysis of the current market situation related to cable TV. And here I'd like to summarize my brief analysis. So firstly, the global cable television market is still growing as television delivery networks. The second, the cable TV growth in coming 5 years is larger than the Netflix, and such cable TV growth is mainly led by the many Asian countries and other developing countries, including Africa's. But we also need to note that the Netflix growth is stronger than the cable in Americas and Western Europe. So we need to fight against with such the OTT's competition. In the third, cable television is also very important network structure for broadband internet access, and OTT needs such high-speed networks to provide their services in high quality to the customers. So we should establish the good relationship between the OTT and the cable television operators. So what is cable television expected to be in the future? So I'd like to propose that 3 points. The first one is the cable TV should be the strong and efficient network infrastructure for a TV broadcasting delivery network, as well as the broadband network for ICT convergence, including ICT convergence will be including AI, IoT, digital financial service, something like that. Such harmonization will be also expected over the cable TV broadband network. And second point is the cable TV should be service providers that will provide the high realistic or innovative entertainment experiences like 4K, 8K, virtual reality, augmented reality, and hybrid broadcast and broadband, and so on. And the third point is cable TV should be easy to deploy, particularly in developing countries, not only the new deployment as well as the migration from the previous old infrastructure into the new infrastructure to facilitate the rapid deployment of the digital TV and the broadband network deployment in those developing countries. So if you look at the existence of the ITU-T Study Group 9, we have been conducting the development of the global standards related to cable television technology more than 20 years as a de jure standardization development organizations, which is called SDO. So before the ITU-T, there is the study group called CMTT, which is more than 20 years ago. So we could look back the SG9's history at those years. Okay, so let's move on to the next agenda, which is introduction of the ITU-T Study Group 9. First of all, I would like to introduce the long history of the Study Group 9 highlights in the past study periods. This slide contains almost the past 20 years of our activities. The oldest our recommendations and most famous recommendations in the world related to cable TV industry is the ITU-T recommendation J83, which defines the digital cable television modulation technology based on the COM, 64 COM and 256 COM. So it was standardized in 1995, but still widely deployed all over the world. And this is the most famous and popular recommendations in Study Group 9 activity. And after a couple of years of the development of J83, we developed the first version of the cable modem recommendations, which is J112, also known as DOCSIS 1.0. This is also the popular technology to realize the cable TV broadband network. And at that time, I mean in the 1990s, cable TV network is the highest broadband infrastructure for the consumers. Because at that time, the fiber to the home is not so widely deployed and the DSL was still popular. Then the next study period, I mean the 2001 to 2004, many applications using the IP packets were emerging. For example, the newer version of the cable modem, and also in that period, cable telephony, IP cable telephony is invented and developed in that study period. In some regions, this cable telephony technology, which is called MGCP, is still widely used and constituting the important portion of the cable TV triple play services. And also in that study period, I'd like to note that we developed the cable TV transport over fiber to the home, but it's not IP-based, but RF-based cable TV transport over fiber to the home. And the standard is the J8185 and the J186. So this is a kind of the optical fiber cable TV technology. Then followed by the new study period, which is the 2005 to 2008. This is a kind of the study period where the huge competition between cable TV versus IPTV. Because in that study period, fiber to the home is getting popular in the typical consumer. And also cable TV developed the newer cable modem specifications, which is DOCSIS 3.0. It can provide more than 100 megabps over cable TV networks. So many applications using the IP, including IPTV, are emerging. And infrastructure competition between cable and telecommunication was started at the time. After that study period, we were entering the hybrid broadcast and broadband era using such technology, as well as the hybrid terminals or hybrid set-top box. So after the severe competition between cable TV and IPTV, cable TV industry started to combine very positively of the IP technology with the existing cable TV technology. So the integrated broadcast and broadband framework will be necessary. So we developed the related recommendations, J205, 206. And also we developed hybrid cable TV set-top box, which has a capability of the RF TV reception as well as the IP application execution platform. And also the advanced cable TV technology like a targeting advertisement is developed in this study period. And the previous study period, which is the 2013 to 2016, we are very focusing on how to evolve the cable TV technologies. We developed the 4K and 8K TV transport over the QAM-based cable TV network. So we developed the recommendations J183 and J288 to enable the channel bundling of the QAM transport cable TV channels. And we developed the J382 based on the DVB-C2, which is the next generation or advanced cable TV transport technology. This is fundamentally improves the transport efficiency. I mean, the bit rate per megahertz is fundamentally improved by this technology. So which is standardized as ITU recommendation J382. Okay, so that is a brief summary of our activities in the past study periods. So commercial brand such as DOCSIS or MGCP or cable telephony is very popular in the world, but under the commercial brand, ITU Starlink 9 was developing the base technology as ITU recommendations. I would appreciate if you note that the situation. So that is a technical introduction of our popular recommendations. This is a brief explanation of the J83, which I introduced in the previous slide and which I introduced as most popular recommendations. So please look at the picture diagram on the shown on the lower side in the screen. So the content is encoded in the MPEG or H260X encoder. Then the packetized into the MPEG transport stream. Such packet modulated by I2T recommendation J83 by 64 COM or 256 COM. And such the modulated signal is transported over the cable TV network. Then the STB receives such signal and demodulate and decode, then the output to the TV screen. That is a basic technology scheme of the digital cable TV network. And next, I'd like to also introduce the cable modems recommendations. SG9 developed the DOCSIS 1.1, 2.0, 3.0, and cabinet DOCSIS as well. Cabinet DOCSIS is mainly used for the MDU, multi-dwelling unit, connected to the fiber to the building. In the inside the building, such fiber to the building signal is converted into the DOCSIS signal, and using the coaxial cable already installed in the building housing. And then the cable modems located in each house will demodulate such IP signal and provide to the customers. And in this study period, we just started the development of the DOCSIS 3.1, the latest cable modem specifications. Okay, so this is the current structure of study group 9. We have the two working parties. The working party 1 is responsible for the video transport, consisting of the 4 questions. Question is the ITU terminology, which refers to a unit responsible for the specific study area. For example, question 1 is responsible for the TV and sound transmission and so on. Please understand that question is a unit of the specific study area. We have working party 1 for video transport, and we also have the working party 2 responsible for the terminals and applications, which is more focusing on the upper layer. And we have one independent questions, which is responsible for the work program and the coordination planning issues as a whole. So this is the current management team of the ITUT study group 9. Chairman is I am chairman of the ITUT study group 9, and we have 3 vice chairmen from the Mr. Blaise Corsair Mamadou from Central African Republic, Mr. Taekyon Kim from Etri Korea, Mr. Ji Fan Shen, ABS China, and we have the 2 TSB advisors and assistant, Mr. Stefano Polidori and Ms. Rosa Angeles Leon de Vivero. So this is our key missions in this study period, 2017 to 2020. In this study period, we are really focusing on the bridging the standardization gap. And one question, which is question 4, is now focusing on the implementation and the deployment of the ITUT recommendations for the developing countries' deployment of cable TV technologies. And also, the evolution of the cable TV networks is our important study area. So that's why we are now developing the ultra-high-speed cable modems and the robust and flexible security methodologies, high-efficiency transport technologies, and so on are now being developed. And on the top of such enhanced cable TV networks, we are trying to provide innovative services such as advanced and immersive video experiences, high realistic experiences, integrated broadcast and broadband services, etc. So this is the summary of the current our work program of ITUT Study Group 9. I tentatively categorized in 3 key missions categories. First one is the BSG, second one is the evolution of cable TV networks, third one is the innovative services. For example, we are now developing the J.DTT district, which is trying to define the open platform for TV program delivery over cable TV networks. In some cases, there is one national cable TV infrastructure, and it should be widely opened to the service providers in that countries. So this recommendation is trying to define such situation. From the evolution of the cable TV network aspect, we are now developing the DOCSIS 3.1, and also we are now developing exchangeable conditional access and DRM solutions, which is expected to be implemented in the future cable TV set-top box for the very flexible security technologies. As for the innovative services, so, we are developing the harmonization of the IBB applications. Each region has their own IBB standard, like HBB TV, hybrid cast, and something like that. But this ACF HRM is trying to define the common core to harmonize the regional specific IBB applications to unify the global standard. I think this presentation material will be distributed over the website, so please look at that file for the rest of the draft recommendations. And new work item will be anytime raised and created by question based on the contribution by participants and agreement by discussion. Okay, so finally, I would like to mention about the collaboration with the other SDOs. This is not an exhaustive list, but these standardization bodies are very associated with the ITUT Study Group 9. The left-hand side, there are 3 international standardization bodies, ITU, IEC, and ISO. In ITU, we have strong relationship with ITUT Study Group 16, ITUR Study Group 6, and ITUD VDT, which is jointly holding this wonderful event. And also we have relationship with other study groups in ITU. As for the IEC, particularly that we have relationship with the TC100, for example, the optical fiber cable signal transport technology. Right-hand side, there are a couple of the regional standard entities. As for HC, we have relationship with TC cable, ISG, ECI, DVB, and so on. We have also relationship with the United States Regional Standardization Body, SCTE, and Cable Labs. As for Korea, we have relationship with TTA and Japan Cable Labs, and so on. So those relationship is defined and qualified by the ITU recommendations. In ITUT, we have some such coordination mechanisms which are defined in recommendations A4, A5, and A6. Okay, this is the end of my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. A very impressive program of work. Congratulations to you and everybody in Study Group 9, Miyaji-san. Maybe we could just have maybe one question or 2 questions before moving on. Incidentally, I did work with Richard Green in the 90s when we developed that original cable specification. I'm afraid I'm that old, so there we are. But yes, that was a great breakthrough. I think it was J83, wasn't it? Something like that.
Yeah.
And as I say, and Richard was the president of Cable Labs at the time. Yeah, I think he's still around, but I haven't seen him for a couple of years. You didn't mention any relationship associated with satellite broadcasting. Is that something which you don't think is necessary, or IT used our study group 4 and so on satellite systems, harmonizing satellite and cable systems? Is there anything there that could be done in the future or should be done?
Okay, so when it comes to the satellite, ITUR SG6 is also responsible for the satellite broadcasting. So we have already relationship with the ITUR study group 6. And sometimes we are communicating with the DVB. So actually we had existing collaboration with the satellite broadcasting industry.
Is there anything, very briefly, I know we'll discuss this in the session after coffee, but is there anything important you think should be done that is not being done at the moment in terms of furthering cable technology and cable success? Are there any gaps? Are there any things that should be done that are not being done at the moment?
Okay, so there should be many things to be done to enhance the cable TV business.
Yes.
And not all of them are covered by single standardization body like ITUT SG9. So I think that it's very important to have a collaboration with the other standardization group, as I shown in the last my presentation.
Okay, I'm sorry, you had a quick question, did you, sir? Please.
Yes, thank you so much, and thank you for the participation, Miyaji-san. My name is Roger Marks, and I'm active in the IEEE 802 standardization group, and we develop standards for technologies like Ethernet and Wi-Fi. And in my experience, the cable operators that I'm familiar with are very active in using Wi-Fi, providing that. But my understanding of the standardization is that it's a kind of an end-to-end solution that ends around terminates around the cable modem. And I'm wondering if there are any efforts to extend the network to the endpoint across the Wi-Fi so that the operator would have access to kind of an end-to-end management to the terminal via the Wi-Fi. It's an area I think that I see opportunities, and I wonder if you're aware of any activity in that area.
Okay, thank you very much for your question. Yeah, maybe I can show the example that TV transport over the multiple devices. We developed such technology in the past, our activities, where if some consumer is in the home, such TV can be shown by the set-top box in the home, but if they go outside the home, they can receive the same content through the Wi-Fi network to their mobile device. And key technology is the content protection technology compatibility between set-top box and a mobile device. So we developed in the last previous study group meeting, we developed the CAS and conditional technology, conditional access technology can be applicable to the multiple devices. That is one example. But study group 9 is not touching for example, Wi-Fi authentication technology. It's kind of the very generic and very specific to the Wi-Fi area. So we don't address this kind of technology, but the content aspect like TV everywhere, we developed related recommendations.
One small follow-up. Can I ask about the quality of service management that's so strong in DOCSIS and whether there's any effort to enhance that to cover the Wi-Fi as well?
Yes. You mean the Wi-Fi connected after the cable modem's case?
That's right, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Actually, we don't have such technology standard. but I believe in some cases the packet prioritization signal is also transferred to the Wi-Fi router to keep the packet prioritization through the CMTS, from CMTS through the cable modem, and then the Wi-Fi router to the Wi-Fi terminals. But I'm not sure that how strongly co-working between the Wi-Fi router and the cable modems.
This sounds like something we can pick up in the next section, but it does sound as if a dialogue about the end-to-end situation regarding cable networks and 802 Wi-Fi's it would be valuable for the world. Anyway, if you don't mind, we'll move on to our next presentation, and if I could just pass this to the next gentleman. Yeah. So. Our next presentation is from Paolo Valenti, who is from Cable Europe, but also has a major role in the ETSI work on cable networks. I won't give you his CV because it's on the website, but let me ask Paolo if he could speak for about 20 minutes and give him the floor. Paolo.
Thank you. Good morning to you all. I would like to first thank you, ITU, for the invitation to participate on this workshop. I think it's very interesting. Our collaboration with ITU SG9 has been increasing, I guess, through various exchange of communications. We had very recently the participation of one of the vice chairmen in our TC Cable meeting, and I think it's fruitful to continue this collaboration. Regarding what I'm representing in Cable Europe and our participation in ETSI Cable, I'm going to guide you through the slides and explain a little bit what are our objectives, what are our main challenges, and what we have been doing in the industry, what we believe it's our contribution to at least for the European landscape. And after that, we will get to the questions, what are the main challenges ahead of us that we should address perhaps with standardization. So I will briefly touch what is the business shift in the cable industry, what we feel that is changing the way that our businesses have been impacted during the recent years, how the standardization has been a business pillar for these continuous efforts to a fierce competition that we have, and how the robust networks are a key element to deal with the content delivery. So just to start with the shift of the business model, we have recently changed during the last years from a network-centric model to a customer-centric model. Today, we don't do what we used to do initially, where we would provide services to our customer and he would not have a big say on it. Today, there are various ways of consuming all the services that we deliver, and because of that, we have to be very quick, very accurate on the way that we address the needs of our customers. As you can see, the way that the traditional model was defined, we would have very distinguished fixed and mobile networks. The services were perfectly distinguished, but cable has been a pioneer in the way that the services were started to be bundled and how we would deliver these services to the customer to be better experienced. And today we have more and more the fixed mobile convergence as a fact that is happening. Mobile operators that are buying cable operators, cable operators that are buying mobile operations, and we have various things that are happening at the same time, always to provide the best connectivity to our customers. In the end, what we want is to keep the customers inside our network and to provide them the best possible experience in a seamless way. There are other things that happened during the recent years. The way that the communication has been established across the various ages, various demographics, we understand that the more traditional people above 60, for them communications was just talk and that's it. Although more savvy people also use the modern technologies. I can tell you that my my parents, my parents-in-law also, they are very keen to use Skype because it's a good way to communicate with a video. But for them, telephony it's the basic thing to use to communicate. As we evolved, the more younger generations, the email is still something that is very important for a generation. But from the 40s onwards, from the Generation X onwards, we understand that the way that people communicate is dramatically changing. My kids, they don't communicate. For them, to make a telephony call, it's a kind of an offense for them. They don't need to call me. They send me a text. I tell them, but why didn't you call me? And they said, why? It's puzzling, but it's happening. And we have to deal with these challenges when we are addressing the customer needs. But also on the video consumption, this is exactly the same thing. We were used to have the linear video as the main product that was used by people. Then at a certain point, and it's not so well identified, the barrier where things changed, but we introduced the non-linear with the video on demand and other solutions. And today we also have something that is very, for me, it's puzzling, the importance of it, but again, it's the facts that speak for it. We have the user-generated content that is taking a position very important in the consumption of the consumers. And this is something that is putting a lot of pressure in our networks. It's putting a lot of pressure on monetizing the content that we want to deliver to our customers. And all these shifts have been very important in the way that we look at the business. So for Cable Europe is a trade association that represents the cable operators in Europe. Our main activity is to work on the regulatory processes next to the European institutions, but we also have what we call the technology policy that I run in Cable Europe, which it has the objective of bringing to the policymakers a better perception about the technology of cable. And that's what I do. I explain to them what is an HFC network, and it's a completely distinct network when compared to the copper network. And it's important for them to understand what we are doing, how we are creating additional competition pressure on the incumbents. And that has only benefited the consumers, but also the industry. Yesterday, when Matthias was doing his presentation, there is a very tight correlation between the presence of cable and the evolution of copper networks to NGA networks. And that has been the way that we have been doing. This is more or less, and this is not exhaustive, the way that we have been working inside Cable Europe, but we believe that the network capacity and management, the spectrum issue, which for us it's very critical also, although we have cables, people sometimes get very confused why we are interested in spectrum. But first of all, inside the coaxial cable we are transporting spectrum, so we have a legitimate interest on spectrum, but also on other adjacent services and technologies that use spectrum. Also consumers, for us it's very important. Today the net neutrality discussion with the QoS measurements, it's something that we are very engaged. On security, cybersecurity is something for us that is very critical, because the responsibilities that come with it to the operators, we need to be very strict on the way that we deal with these topics. Regarding the compliance, energy efficiency, it's another topic that we have been very active. And the new services, I will not tell you, because you all know what are the new things that are coming up and people are demanding from operators. So we try to be, some of them we give a priority. Of course, for us, DOCSIS 3.1 and the full duplex, the technology neutrality for us, it's very important. Some others we just follow and we intervene when it's needed. That, and before entering in the HCTC cable, because of these needs from our members, we understood that being part of the standardization was something that was very important, because it's, for us, it's the one of the most important parts is to be present and contribute to the standardization process in order to bring the needs, a standard. I have a legal background, and for me, a law that simply exists because somebody thought about it, it doesn't mean anything. It should exist to solve an issue, to propose a solution. Standards are the same thing. We should first identify the problems, and then we should develop a standard to help to carry on and solve the problem. And that's why we engaged in the ETCTC cable. When I joined Cable Europe, one of my main tasks was to start participating in ETSI, and then I became chairman, and I've been working together with it's a close group. It's not as wide as other technical committees in ETSI that are very active, but we are a loyal group that have been working to develop the possibilities of cable operators. TC Cable is organized in 4 working groups. The working group 1 that has the architecture, interface, and protocols mainly deals with these topics. I have another slide that explains what topics we are covering. We have the HFC distribution, operational best practices. We have the energy efficiency and sustainability, and the network fault monitoring and performance management, and test and measurement best practices. So this is a brief, the presentation, I believe it will be shared with you, but this is briefly what we are doing. I will not bother you with the details. But this is the things that, for the time being, we believe that, at least in the standardization perspective, it's important that we follow and we contribute actively. Just for you to have an idea of the entities that are most active on this activity of standardization, we have Liberty Global, which is the largest cable operator in the world, because Comcast has less customers. Vodafone, that very recently, although a mobile operator, has acquired several cable operations, Cablodgen in Germany, Ono in Spain, and now they merged also in the Netherlands. So it became a very relevant cable operator. The West is a small cable operator in Austria, but very active in the standardization. Broadcom, as a vendor, has been very active, notably on energy efficiency. And Cable Europe and Cable Labs. Cable Labs is the forum, the industry forum that has been developing all the cable specifications from its inception. They work very closely with us in Europe because at a certain point in time, we understood that to have a better scale in the DOCSIS specification and to have, I would say, cheaper equipment, it was critical to have a global standard, because until the version DOCSIS 3.0, there was always an European version, an American version, an Asian version, and the DOCSIS 3.1 was the first time that we had a global adopted standard that would be possible to bring us scale. So these entities, and that's our objective when we sit down in TC Cable to look at the standardization challenges, to serve the 64 million customers in European Union, where we provide all these services. It's a big responsibility. We understand that any decision that we make has a big impact on the industry, and that's why we are always looking forward to collaborate with other organizations, because when we compare cable technology with technologies like mobile, the scale is completely different. And although we believe that we are big, but comparing to other technologies, we are very small, and the scale is a key to have cheaper equipment. So, getting then to the third part, why we believe that it's very important to have a robust network to deal with all the services that we have to deliver to our customers. Our main focus at this moment is to deploy the DOCSIS 3.1 and the full duplex. The full duplex is still in an early stage, but the 3.1 has been adopted by many cable operators at this point. It doesn't bring yet the price point that people would believe that would change immediately. So there are various discussions, and although it was a specification that was very quickly developed and brought into commercialization. There was a very interesting fact that is not to be referred to you. There were some cable operators that immediately jumped on the DOCSIS 3.1. The best case is the TDC UC in Denmark, where they signed a commitment 2 years ago with Huawei to deploy DOCSIS 3.1 in all of their network. So it's a massive change, and it's perhaps on the far end more radical adoption of 3.1. And if we look at the other operators, now that we have many flavors, we have some operators that are starting to upgrade a little bit of their network. Some of them are already acquiring CMTSs, cable modems, because it's retro-compatible, so it allows to play with the needs and with the demand of consumers. One of the main arguments that I've always presented when talking with policymakers was mainly to explain them the advantages of cable. Cable is by nature technology that allows incremental upgrades, and this is critical in a business that is very investment intensive, and to be differentiated in this, it's very, very important. So we can always upgrade our networks according to demand, and that's why this evolution of 3.1, you will not see a massive deployment, but you will see companies that are going very deep in this deployment, but some other companies that are doing according to their needs and to the needs of the market. The fixed mobile convergence is also something that has helped us to provide a seamless connectivity to our customers. And these two elements that I've put down, which is the software-defined networks and network functions virtualization, and from the HFC to a distributed access architectures, were two elements that brought a kind of hold on to the 3.1 deployment. It kind of created the perception on the cable operators that going immediately to 3.1 and with the requirements that were needed to upgrade in their networks, since they were already doing some changes in the network, because the amplifiers had to be touched and many things had to be touched inside the network, something was happening at the same time, because the software-defined networks and the distributed access architectures were also imposing several changes in the network. So what we are watching today is all these three movements are going hand in hand, and operators are trying to understand how they will deploy how they will evolve their networks. And they have been worked very closely. These elements have been playing very closely to the deployments in networks. And this is how we can see that the networks are evolving now. For the time being, I believe that there is a strong commitment with the 3.1. The major cable operators are looking at it. I sense that the smaller cable operators have not yet committed, because they believe that the price point is still challenging for them, because it's a big evolution. But that's the objective of Cable Europe through all these processes, to facilitate and to promote this deployment. Just to conclude, Cable Europe, and this is a side note, Cable Europe, being the trade association, we also organize a Cable Congress in March, where we will have our operators present, and this year it will be in Dublin, and that is where we usually discuss the more strategic and business topics. Standardization has always been one of the topics that we try to bring to their attention, because like I said in the beginning, trying to promote standardization without a real need from the industry, there is no use on that. So we try to explain to them what are the challenges that you have, so that you can standardize something that can help you on your day-to-day business. And that will be all, at least for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paolo. Maybe just a couple of questions before we move on. Do you have any questions, ladies and gentlemen? If not, Paolo, asking you the same question, if I may, are there any areas of work that are not being done at the moment that you believe should be done, and by whom? What do you think? Is that too difficult a question?
It's a $1 million question. I think it's not easy to reply to it. We understood, for example, that there was a cross-sector standardization need on SDN, and that's why we are participating inside ETSI on the industry specification group, ISG, NFE. Sorry, this one's not SDN, NFE. Regarding our core activity at this point, bringing the standardization of 3.1 to Europe, it's very important. As you all know, ETSI is the European, it's one of the 2 European standard organizations, and when we discuss these topics with the Commission, with the European Commission and with the institutions, they are always very keen to indicate the importance of the European standard organizations, and we are, it's a kind of an important step to bring it to ETSI, the DOCSIS 3.1. Other topics, I think, like I said to you, it's very critical that the businesses align themselves together. Yesterday, I was listening to a presentation of, I think it was Roberto, that he was proposing at least 2 questions that he was raising, and for me it was very striking to understand that first there should be, I remember, if I recall correctly, there should be a good integration in the set-top box of all the experiences. It can be done, and it already can be done. What happens many times, it's a question of copyright, it's a question of business relations between the content provider and the distributor. And I think once this discussion is better aligned at the business level, the technology is already there, is in place. I can give you a good example. In Portugal, it's a small country, and we have a very fierce competition in all the pay TV operators. And one of the things that happened in 2012 was that we had a service that was deployed by the cable operator, because it is very innovative, and it allowed catch-up TV 7 days. You could go 7 days behind, and you could watch all this programming. And this was critical for something that happened some years later, because now I'm living in Belgium, and when I arrived, my first surprise was I could not have this type of services. And I said, but technologically, it's possible. Why is it happening that we cannot have these services? And it was a question of discussions of rights. So some content owners were not allowing these rights to be delivered. And in the end, it's only the full sector that is being impacted by this. And that's why Netflix, when arrived in Belgium, had a very good success. And that's why in Portugal they are not having any success, because people have so much content already available for free, or at least inside their subscription, that they don't want to have an additional cost on something else. And I think if the businesses sit together and say, okay, let's collaborate more and let's find common solutions for all of us, I think then the standards will happen very quickly. The other topic that was also mentioned, or as an example, is the NPVR. NPVR it's already available for quite some time. But for example, in Belgium, making a recording of for a private copy, if I use a DVD in my house or something like that, it's fine, it's a private copy. If it's an NPVR, the law says that it's not considered a private copy because it's remotely accessed. These are things that are very challenging when we are talking about the user experience, because in the end the user will not understand these things. He will say, but come on, you need to find a solution amongst yourselves. Don't bring me these justifications. These are full justifications. And I think it's a process that when I joined Cable Europe, and my intention by having this role in TC Cable was bring also the business concerns, so that when we were developing a standard, at least we would understand what is in the mindset of our business people when they are discussing negotiations and everything, because it's important. Otherwise, we will always be. We can have very good ideas from the technology point of view, but if the businesses don't realize how the advantages that they will have from these technologies, it's no use. It's just work for having a nice specification. In the end, we will not achieve our goals, which is to make the sector thrive. I think it's very important to have this approach.
But how to bring the industry people together, and how to marshal them, and how to get them to agree, that's a question, isn't it? But if it's a question of your point about MPVR in Belgium, does that mean that everything that I put on the cloud is not private to me? It belongs to the nation or something?
I would say that if you are doing that, at least the cable operator is not allowed to create an NPVR with all unless he has a very specific authorization from the content owner or the content provider. It's not possible, and that creates a lot of hurdles to get a seamless. I remember that one of the main challenges that in Belgium was being discussed, was about the blackouts in the catch-up TV. How many minutes of blackouts could be negotiated in Portugal? We could access all the grid of channels for 7 days, and this is something that for the consumer it was one of the killer applications that we found very useful to keep the consumer inside, the customer inside our platform. So it's critical to that everybody. And in this case, broadcasters, distributors, content providers, the big majors, everybody worked together to have a seamless solution, and it gave the results. So we didn't have a Netflix urging to capture. They have some customers, but it's mainly those initial promotions and things like that. So I think
very interesting. Belgium is actually the European home of cable television, isn't it? With the first to start and the greatest penetration for many years. And it's interesting to hear they still aren't able to agree with each other, which was like that when I lived there. Anyway, there we are. Can we move on then to our third presentation? And could you give Simao the hand control? And everybody knows Simao Campos. He's responsible for most things, I think, here at the ITU. And he's going to talk about standardization and ICT accessibility in the ITU. Of course, I suppose he's most famous for ITU-T Study Group 16, but I'm sure he's going to speak about things wider than that. So, Simao, you have the floor.
Thank you, David. Thank you all for a very good pleasure to be here today and speak with you about our horizontal topic. But just let me clarify, David, I'm not responsible for all things in ITU, just the good ones. Okay, so leaving jokes apart, what I would like to speak with you about today is accessibility, ICT services and products, and horizontally, and then to speak a little bit more focused on the content delivery cable industry perspective for that. So first, I'd like to start with a few facts about disabilities. It's about we have about estimates from WHO is that we have about 1.1 billion persons with disabilities. So 15 to 20% of persons in this planet have disabilities. And curiously or interestingly, that 80% of those are concentrated in low-income countries. And so and besides being in lower-income countries, people that are below the poverty line, 1 out of 5 are also persons with disabilities. That urged the United Nations about 12 years ago to pass a convention, that is the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, which became into force in 2008. So this year would be about 10 years that it has been put into force. And we have a very large number of countries that adopted that convention. And it's interesting to see the kind of language in that convention. For me, it's a little bit unusual how strong the language in there, because for those that signed, that ratified that convention, that brings responsibilities to change the regulations and their laws. And maybe this is also a reflection of the very strong advocacy power, the very big motivation that persons with disabilities usually have to work towards their governments to fight for equalization of bringing society at a more even level. We in the technology sector, and I think most sectors in society, are recognizing that ICT is a very powerful tool to equalize, bring people at the same level of abilities, empowering persons with disabilities to fulfill their potential. So we have a very good opportunity here. On one side, from the societal point of view, but also from the business development point of view, of encompassing a segment of population that has been mostly being left on the margins. Well, maybe some of you know that ITU works on standards in many different areas, like smart cities, IoT, media compression standards, e-health, network technologies, for like optical networks, access networks, Internet of Things, security, and accessibility. And one might ask, well, why you need standards for accessibility? No, can't we just have the proprietary solutions taking care of that? Well, first we have the large number of people that I just mentioned that are attaching. So solutions for accessibility have the potential of benefiting a large number of people. The accessibility is not only for persons with disabilities, favors them, helps them a lot, but it's also for other persons. So we have issues of accessibility in general for children, for the elderly, for us when we poor Westerns go to Japan and can't read a thing, or even not too far, if you go to Hungary, if you don't speak the language, then you're in trouble, for example. So there are many issues that around accessibility that can touch us in one way or another. Also aspects of temporary disabilities, like when you break a leg, and then you don't. Physical accessibility to a building becomes a big issue for you. Given these numbers, one of the concepts that are very important is that of mainstreaming, of inclusion. It's not only a human rights issue, it's also societal efficiency issue. I mean, making society work smoothly, serving all, working for all. But also it's an issue of driving down cost for the products and increasing the user base. And so how can one provide accessibility for ICT services in a cost-effective manner? For me, there are two aspects to that. One is standards, global standards that are needed, and also the concept of a universal design. The concept of universal design is that a solution when it's designed should be, the accessibility aspects should be taken into consideration from the beginning of the design, not being an afterthought. Because retrofitting is always very expensive. You're going to say, well, we have systems in place. Okay, well, I have a building. Okay, I have to demolish this, and that, and to put ramps, to make put bigger elevators and other things there to give. So that's a big cost. But if you do that in the beginning of the design, it's easier to accommodate. It's a cost, additional cost, but it's not the same cost as retrofitting later. And that is the same for systems that have an impact installed base, like TV set. A TV set has a life. Today is easier because you have an update of firmware and things like that may facilitate, but you still have the remote control and other aspects that are physical and more costly to satisfy. So having a design that includes accessibility of all from the beginning is always a good idea. And having that standards-based means that it can be reused, can be available for more people, increase competition, and increase chances for all. In terms of the standardization work that touches accessibility in ITU, I'd like to touch the two sectors, ITUR, the radio communication sector, and the ITU-T, telecommunication standardization sector. In ITUR, I'd like to mention ITUR study groups 1 and 5. They basically are more concerned with aspects like hearing aids and near distance devices that would impact or would have a relation to persons that lost hearing. So the deaf or people with deep loss, so hard of hearing. And the relationship of interference of frequencies and using of the spectrum in relation to these devices. So these two groups, they have various reports and standards and discussions that deal with this compatibility of radio frequency use and interference with hearing aids and other short distance devices. ITUI study group 6, I think, is focusing more on standards level, in particular for the broadcast services. So we have there issues that I would say are closer to the issues that we face on the T sector with more common standards, more streamlined standards for specification for systems. So they have various recommendations and reports that deal with accessibility of media. They also have work on the IBB, Integrated Broadcast Broadband. And in that context, we also have a common group with them for standardization, that is the Intersector Rapporteur Group on Audiovisual Media Accessibility, IRGAVA, which is common between ITUR Study Group 6, ITU-T Study Group 9, and the ITU-T Study Group 16. And David there is a co-chair of that group. In ITU-T, I'd like to mention two study groups that have active work in accessibility. Study Group 16, Multimedia, is the so-called lead study group on accessibility and human factors. That means a coordinating role within the sector for this activity. And we do have one specific question. So as Satoshi-san mentioned before, the question is the unit of development of specifications that block a certain topic. So we have questions for conditional access in 9, we have questions for e-health in study group 16, video coding, and we have one for accessibility and another for human factors. In study group 20, they are focused on IoT and smart cities, but they do have one recommendation that they are working on relating to IoT requirements for accessibility when one thinks of IoT devices, in particular for the gray zone between devices that don't really normally fit within the standardization processes that are developed that have some requirements. In terms of the working accessibility in study group 16, I don't want to get into details because it's probably not much of the focus here, but I'll touch into a few of them that I think might give some ideas concerning standardization also for the cable perspective. Also here I'm mentioning the IRGAVA that I just described. And also that we have some other specialized groups that are more of the coordination nature, with the joint coordination activity on accessibility and human factors that tries basically to be a think tank or a place for exchanging information across the different sectors and involving persons with disabilities and other organizations that represent them. And then the DICAD, that is a group within the Internet Governance Forum that also focus on accessibility discussions. And it is sponsored by ITUT. So speaking a little bit about the accessibility standards we have, the ones I'd like to bring to your attention because may be useful to you. We have one standard that defines terminology for accessibility, and this accessibility is many times you have debates that are endless, but because people think that they're talking about the same thing, but not. So, in terms of terminology is quite important, and we defined some terminology that is for communication in English for international use. Could be particularly useful, for example, in procurement processes, so that you define what you're talking about more easily. We also have some guidance for standard developers. We have one checklist that would be useful that standard writers check before they start writing the standard, or as they are writing the standard, to make sure that accessibility has been included in design, so that the concept of universal design and including the accessibility needs early in the design process. Similarly, there is a wider guide that was developed with ISO and IEC, that's known on the ISO IEC side as Guide 71, which is published in ITU as H Series Supplement 17. So they are two overview. The checklist is very summarized, very purpose-oriented. The supplement is more descriptive, gives more background on the issues in terms of making designs inclusive, to make the designs that are towards universal. You also mentioned two technical papers we prepared, which are of more, let's say, institutional nature, which are how to organize accessible meetings and how to allow accessible remote participation in meetings. Those are two important aspects, because one fundamental element in developing accessible standards is that some involvement of persons with disabilities is essential. They have a motto in the disability community, which is nothing about us without us. You might have heard this motto before, but they feel very strongly about that, and it stems from the idea that we maybe have good intentions in providing accessibility, but without really knowing the issues, having a hands-on knowledge of what the situations that they face every day, day-to-day life, we might make nonsensible decisions and design decisions in the standards that might defeat the purpose. So in the working in study group 16, we make a point of including persons with disabilities as part of the discussions, the technical discussions. So we have technical people that have disabilities that participate in our process. So that's one way to try to accommodate. So we felt the need to develop these guides, because it's very difficult to organize these meetings not knowing these details. So these two documents, they provide some guidance in that direction that might be useful from an institutional level. So this is valid for anyone, for any institution organizing meetings that will have a person with disabilities participating either physically or remotely. In terms of a more content-oriented part, I wanted to call attention to some work that we are trying to do together with SC35 of JTC1, ISO IEC JTC1, that has to do with caption, subtitles, and audio description and sign language in audiovisual content. They have developed a set of international standards that deal with that, and we are considering in study group 16, in coordination with IIT-AVA, to also make them ITUT recommendations. I know that ITUR Working Party 6C is also giving some thought of how that could be done in their end. But this is a new process that we are trying to improve the collaboration there through a stronger liaison relationship with them. And we have a meeting in February where we're going to have their presence here in Geneva, and also presence with ITU experts to discuss how we can further collaborate. We have some work items in 16 that are developing use cases for inclusive media access services and specifications on improving audio intelligibility. So that's particular for hard of hearing. That would be a useful method and algorithm that could be applied to facilitate their hearing of the programs. Not strictly related to accessibility per se, I just want to mention, because this is a general issue, we are doing study group 16 more on a little bit on the accessibility side, but also on the e-health side, together with WHO. We're developing specifications that deal with safe listening. So on the accessibility side, there is a certain class of devices that are not for persons that have disability, difficulty hearing, but is something to enhance how they can hear. So it could also be used by persons that are hard of hearing as a so-called cheap hearing aids, because they wouldn't be fitted, they wouldn't be adjusted for their needs necessarily, but that would allow us to, a normal hearing person, to really hear the whispering there in the corner of the room, some things like that. So some people are, in the spy business, and they'll be useful for them, but then many people are in the curiosity business, they also intend. So there is a significant number of these devices, and then we talk about developing countries and those market pressures in terms of cost and the poverty lines, etc. There is a very big possibility that this kind of device might end up in those markets trying to fill the hearing aid gap. So we felt that it was necessary to do some standardization in terms of features and documenting how this device could be used safely. And it's basically on the other side, that in the e-health side, is more related to something that's more common that we have today, which are music players. And the youngsters in particular, and some of the not so youngsters, generation X and Y, are more and more hearing music in their own devices. And the one big concern, especially for the young ones we have, but that goes to the not so young ones anymore, is how loud the people hear that. So there are actually in Europe certain regulations that require the action by these music players to prevent people from hearing too loud. But that is that's not a complete story, because it's not only how loud it is, it's for how long you hear. So, and that exposure, that means the energy that you're exposed to, a dose of sound that causes a certain impact on the cilia in your inner ear, and how early you might have onsets of hearing loss. And the WHO is extremely concerned about that this, instead of having hearing loss at your late 50s, 60s, to start having that at your 40s. So they are extremely concerned about this, what could be an epidemic of hearing loss, early hearing loss, because people are being exposed for music that is played too loud or too long. So it is within this context that we're having this standardization. Why I bring it here is because while we are all in the content delivery business, WHO is not worried so far on the let's say a TV set being played out loud, but it is an issue that I just wanted to bring to your attention. That is might be important in the medium term, and it's an issue to keep in mind. In terms of other specifications touching accessibility, I want to mention is that in 16 we also have the IPTV work, And IPTV worked with the accessibility experts. They developed one specification for labeling the accessibility level of an IPTV terminal device. So let's say either a set-top box or a TV set that would provide accessibility features, in that case using IPTV, that we could have 3 levels clearly identified to the consumer of what level of accessibility they could get with that TV set or with that set-top box. And what we call the basic, enhanced, and main profile. So 3 levels of accessibility, the main level being the more complete one, and the really basic accessibility features. And together with that, we created a conformance specification so that you can, in a way, verify and attest the level of verify the level that your own device is satisfying those requirements. So we did that for IPTV devices, but this is something that I think would be applicable to any device for the user. And unfortunately, I didn't see neither in the study group 9 nor in the ETSI cable presentations any reference to accessibility and this kind of. So maybe there is no opportunity here. Also, in particular, because of the convention that I mentioned in the beginning of the presentation, because the convention is bringing regulatory and legislative implications, law that you might need at a certain point to show and have these capabilities provided to the user. And this is something that might help, having this kind of specifications might help in the procurement, for example, of set-top boxes, of TV sets, and in those aspects. Other areas that we are looking to is emergency communications, in particular interface for persons with hearing and speaking difficulties to request rescue services, and profile metadata for persons with specific needs, in particular that have disabilities. So just closing to wrapping up in my thoughts. So I see that there are some of the hot areas that were mentioned. So we have things going more towards smart systems, smart TV sets. There was a mention of a smart OS for TVs in Satoshi-san's presentation. Immersive systems, augmented reality, virtual reality as being areas of expansion, in particular in developed markets, to try to catch user attention and keep them interested in the cable technologies. These are great new features, but they are potentially have a great potential for creating inclusion barriers if not done properly. So it's any new work in this direction, including these aspects, I think would benefit from involvement of persons with disabilities in the requirements and the development of use cases, so that whatever the technical specifications are, they are solid and meeting the needs of persons with disabilities. So just concluding, I think that international standards are necessary for affordable, inclusive, accessible services and systems. There are useful specifications being produced that are easing mainstreaming of accessibility in standards, and that for study group 9 in particular, I think the specifications regarding audiovisual media accessibility should be of interest. There are standardization opportunities. We saw many of them mentioned, touching the systems and the user devices, and I think it would be very wise to include the accessibility aspects, considering the implications of the convention, as well as the needs to expand into these new markets and meeting the requirements that to come. So with that, I'd like to conclude, and thank you for your attention. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Simao. I'm sure the study group 9 people noted the need to ratchet up their accessibility work, as you say. If you don't mind, because of the time, we'll come back to questions for Simao after we've had the presentation from Peter McCavick, who is going to speak now about ITU. Peter McCavick is the chairman of the DVB project. He's also a manager of a substantial portion of the EBU, including his wife and family. So if we could have Peter's slides, please. And I'll invite you to take the floor. Thank you.
Thanks, David. Thank you, colleagues. I hope I all find you well and getting ready for the weekend. I can also address questions on HBB TV, with whom I am very closely related. But this presentation concentrates on the area of cable. Now, I'll tell you the interesting bit at the end. I think the first thing is that if you look at the overall media market at the moment, and these figures come from the European Broadcasting Union, and they're from last year, but the bottom line is that people are spending more and more time on media. Now, that's great news, because it means that anybody that's delivering media needs to deliver more of it, and ultimately more time on media should mean more revenue for those that are making, delivering, consuming the media. The other thing to note is that the internet consumption of media has had a relatively limited impact on standard linear TV and radio consumption. So it's had an impact, for sure, but the bottom line is people are spending more time on media, and that a large proportion of that increased time is coming from the internet. And there is a decline in linear television, radio, newspaper consumption, but that decline is relatively small. So there's a message in this, which is that there is a transition happening, but it's much, much slower than many would have you believe. So that provides those that are involved in the more traditional means of delivering television services with a flexible and shall we say, an ideal opportunity to facilitate that shift. So we can leverage the strength in the linear television radio business and into the online space. Where does this leave cable? Well, we'll get to that in a second. The main thing to note about the DVB project is we do lots of technology standardization development. We're at the heart of the transition from analog to digital television, be that a transition that takes place on satellite, terrestrial, or indeed on cable. And the DVB project has, broadly speaking, developed new technologies for each one of the new applications that appeared. So when we were all talking about MPEG-2, the DVB project was the heart of that development process and indeed led the transition from analog to digital television, likewise from SD to HD, and we're now in the process of all purchasing 4K television sets at home, at least those of us that have them available. So what do we do about that transition? Well, that's a more complicated one because there's a variety of things happening at the same time. But I'm going to focus on the area of cable. And just like in everything else, we need to strengthen the broadcasting space and we need to facilitate our transition. And it's me that said that. And there's a picture of me looking much better than I do now. What's about cable? Well, until a relatively short period of time ago, and actually a surprisingly short period of time ago, cable television was synonymous with providing MPEG-2 transport stream over DVB-C or some equivalent. Now, as we know, there is a transition underway to IP in that space. But why? Well, there's a variety of reasons. The first one of those is that distributing cable services is expensive. And once you get past the popular mainstream services, there's a wide range of minority services which are of relatively limited appeal to the vast majority of your audience. The problem with that is that unfortunately they're not all in the same place. So your long tail is not just a long tail, but it's a very wide tail as well. And the basic message is that their minority services are ideally suited to the whole concept of IP unicast. So wouldn't it be great if we had a proper IP unicast mechanism for the delivery of cable services over cable television? The next area is the content format zoo. Now that's a slightly more complex one to explain, and I'm going to do it relatively quickly. But here's a picture of a cable network that delivers. I can wiggle. Can I wiggle?
Yeah.
Here we are. Over here we have a subscriber. We have the edge mechanisms, and there we have the production and the capture and the processing of all of the content. And there's a mixture of telephony, IP, and television delivered over that cable network. There's the television bit of it, delivered over DVB-C or some similar system in a linear format. There's the internet and the telephony bit, and the telephony is now all IP anyway, delivered over the same network. Of course, everybody uses DOCSIS. There was a DVB solution in that space, by the way, but we lost. But there you go. So it's divided between the linear delivery of television services and the internet-based delivery of telephony and other data services. There's a third element in this picture, which is all the stuff that adds value to a cable network, like catch-up television and whatever else. And it's in that space where you're transcoding piles of content that the second pain point we have is. So cable operators are reconditioning the same content multiple times. Broadcasters are doing it as well, but this is about cable, so there you go. And it's a pain. It costs money. A common format that could be used across all client devices would save operational costs. Seems logical. Now the issue, of course, is that the content conversion typically and always causes some form of downgrading in the quality of the user experience. That's a pain. So not just would we like to save money, but we'd also like to ensure that there's a fairly uniform user experience generated using our services. This lends us to the concept of IP multicast. So let me explain. You've got a cable network, and that cable infrastructure is divided between a digital cable transmission service and DOCSIS. And basically, any cable organization is going to be modifying or using its slider between the various different services it has available. So it'll have a DVB-C component or something similar. Heaven knows, in many countries, you also have analog cable. and then you'll have a DOCSIS component which is also delivered out of band. And as we've heard, there's a push to upgrade the DOCSIS system and for DOCSIS to take a greater and greater proportion of the overall bandwidth. Great news. But instead of thinking just about that, shall we say, physical infrastructure and what you delivered across that physical infrastructure, if we were to think of application layers. So there's, and we were to take the traditional cable service, which delivers MPEG-2 transport stream over cable, it'd be great. There is a solution for the delivery of IP multicast over using technology such as DVB-Dash. And there's even various different proprietary elements for the delivery of IP multicast. The difficulty is that there's no real established format. So, type of advice that we would give. First thing is, if you're a cable operator, deploy DVB-C2 now, along with your DOCSIS, and sell it as a UHD TV upgrade. The basic thing about the modern versions of DOCSIS and DVB-C2 is that it provides you with opportunities to do channel bonding. And that's when it really gets interesting in terms of the efficiencies across your cable networks. The second bit is, if you're a broadcaster, or indeed an operator as well, to be honest, work to finalize IP multicast solutions. And of course, we would recommend you do it in the context of the DVB project, because, well, that's who I represent. So 2 bits of advice. In the zoo, deploy DVB-C2 now and as quickly as possible, sell it as a UHD upgrade, and work to finalize the IP multicast solution. The bottom line being, transition to IP is underway. Let's jump on the bandwagon. There's a combination of unicast and multicast required. Multicast doesn't exist. At least no established formats exist. Let's work to standardize those. There you go. Questions?
Okay, thank you very much, Peter. Yes, maybe of course, I'm sure that people from the floor will have questions, but Peter, is there anything that do you think that DVB is not doing now that it should be doing in respect of cable networks? Are there any areas where standards are obviously needed and are not being pursued? Or is there any dialogue that DVB should be having with other standards bodies? For example, that issue about end-to-end services involving Wi-Fi and cable networks.
So, good question. Thank you, David. IP multicast is the big area which requires work. Mm-hmm. That's the big one, and that's the holy grail, if you like. The second one is the notion of delivering an IP-based service in a similar way as a linear television service. So linear television has the great benefit of fast channel change, easy discoverability, and good electronic program guides and whatever else that can be generated reasonably automatically. So the idea is in an IP domain is to be able to develop in as horizontal a manner as possible in order to facilitate cheaper cable devices, similar types of functionality. So 2 big elements in terms of standardization, one IP multicast, and the second is the notion of a live IP delivered service. Should there be dialogue? For sure. Because let's face it, DOCSIS is dominating in terms of the bidirectional services that are being delivered. And there are many operators that are migrating to more and more provision of DOCSIS and newer versions of DOCSIS with channel bonding and whatever else within their cable infrastructures. So we're seeing that transition to IP happening, and it's happening, to be honest, in the developed markets relatively rapidly. So there needs to be an increased dialogue between those that are providing the core technologies like DOCSIS and DVB-C2 and those that are providing the applications. So in DVB we've got a fairly integrated, well-organized system. To be honest, the dialogue between ourselves and the cable labs is not as it could have been, and that's something we need to work on.
Is there any contradiction, excuse me, I mean, between DOCSIS originating in cable labs in the US and the decline of the usage of cable networks in the US, do you think? I mean, yesterday, Peter, I know you weren't here, but our friends from IHF said the problem with cable in the US is that it was being milked for money, and that the subscriptions and so on were 2 or 3 times as much as they should be, and the price of this was the decline of cable. I guess there's some contradiction there, isn't there, in the sense that DOCSIS is the worldwide interactive IP system for cable, and yet it's home the cable networks are on decline. Do you have any good explanations for why all this is happening like that?
Yeah, I think the comment that was made yesterday is there anybody here from the United States? Great. Cable in America is just too bloody expensive. Excuse my French. It's just too expensive. It really is just too expensive. It was an accident waiting to happen. And independent of the technology, it's just too expensive a proposition. I have a colleague in the United States whose average bill to his cable subscriber is in and around $200 a month. That's incredibly expensive for what it is. That includes telephony, internet, and TV, but that's still amazingly expensive. So, yes, the cable operators have been very successful. Sorry, come on, yes?
Yeah, my name is Peter Wallop.
Microphone, please.
Microphone.
Hi, my name is Peter Wallop. I work for the ITU as a consultant, and that question is a very interesting one. And the price argument, I doubt if that is the only explanation,
No,
because
I agree.
price is very easy to lower unless your cost structure is that high that you can't lower your price. Now, that would say that cable companies in the US are very inefficient. I don't think we can state that. So price, yes, perhaps they've become lazy because they've been able to charge a high price for a long time. But I think price can't be the only explanation why things go so badly, apparently, in the US.
So I think you're right. Your issue is that if you look at the cable retransmission fees that are charged by the networks in the United States, they're of an order of 8 times higher than the equivalent fees charged by anybody that charges cable retransmission fees in Europe. So the whole thing, the price issue extends right across the chain. It's not just the cable operators that are milking it, it's the broadcasters and the networks that are milking the cable operators that then milk the consumer. So it goes across the chain. The other thing is that their proposition is relatively weak in the face of an OTT proposition which is efficiently delivered.
Yes.
So it's a combination of price and right across the value chain and the core proposition.
Okay, now we've told our American friends
Who aren't here, by the
who
way.
aren't here what they should be doing. Just another quick one, Peter. You mentioned 2 recommendations. Go to C2, I mean loosely, go to C2, the new XQAM, more efficient system, okay.
That facilitates channel bonding.
Right, facilitates channel bonding and IP multicast. But, we're in the ITU and we're about not just standardization, that's critically important, but development. I mean, what would you, is that the recipe for developing countries as well? Or is there anything what would you advise people from developing countries? And nowhere on that list is accessibility, the point that Simao raised.
So, I mean, I think, first of all, the second question first, the accessibility is a critically important problem. Mm-hmm. I work, as you'll see from my email address, in fact, I used to work very closely with you, and not just with you, but beside you, because your office is 2 doors away, but as representative of the public service media organisations in Europe, we hold dear the developments that we have led in the area of access services. It's a critical part of the service that is provided by the public service media organisations. And we transfer that into the DVB project. And indeed, only yesterday we were having a webinar on the latest version of the subtitling specification that's been done within the DVB project, which was surprisingly exciting. As somebody who's worked in and around subtitling for a while, how you could have a 2-hour webinar on subtitling beats me, but there were lots of people interested. So that's a critically important issue, but, and here's the big but, if I might, that's at an application layer. So the cable operators need to be very conscious of this. They need to be able to deliver all these services, but they themselves, at least for the vast majority of the content they deliver, are not going to be doing the access services. But they need to be mindful of the need to have all the technical facilitation for that as across their networks. Now, I know many cable operators will say we're not just a pipe, but there you go. What was the first question?
About developing countries. You couldn't just say to them change to C2 and IP multicast, could you? I mean, you have to give them some suggestions which would be perhaps more manageable, less expensive, and so on. I wondered what you'd say to developing countries.
But your issue is, and this is something where you need to weigh up the cost benefit depending on the revenue structures that you have in place. Satellite's not a bad option as well, folks in the developing world, although it can be quite vulnerable in cases. But the basic message would be deploy the best technology you can across your networks. That was short. If it's not C2, then it's C, and at least you should be deploying a digital service. Don't be deploying analog services at this point in time.
Okay, Simao, we haven't had time for questions for you. What do you think about this issue of developing countries? Do you think, is there any case for sort of special recommendations which apply to developing countries to help them with the evolution of their networks? I mean, we understand Peter's point about using the best there is, but is that necessarily the right advice, do you think, by study group 16 to developing countries?
On the field of accessibility, you mean?
That would be one area, yes, of course, accessibility.
Well, I think that the realities in the field are really complex, and it's difficult to have very good advice. But of course, going towards newer technologies is keeping steps, evolving. In the cable area, for example, many countries are still with analog systems, and so very far from the realities of the DOCSIS 3.1. As they evolve, look forward towards those aspects. Also, on the if you consider the aspects of accessibility and the implications of adoption by the convention by many of the countries, it also means that requirements in providing services are becoming tougher. No? Not only for cable television, broadcast over the air, even cinemas. I'm Brazilian. Let me quote the example in Brazil that a law was recently passed on requirement for accessibility in all entertainment services, so affecting cinemas, for example. So they must provide accessible cinemas for the blind. Can you imagine that? So how you provide that? And then imagine the impact that on the smaller operator. You know? So this is not something. This is not a developing country issue, because we could have in Geneva have a small movie theater providers that would be affected just as heavily as the small provider in Brazil or medium provider in Brazil. I think that as more systems are designed with accessibility in mind, probably those would facilitate the delivery of the services. Take exception to one thing that Peter said, that the cable or the operators are not responsible for the content. It's true, but they are liable for it. So they are the ones that have to meet certain, let's say, percentages of content having the accessible content provided. So they are kind of in the middle of the sandwich in that sense. They are not, no, okay, I'll provide what I get, but they are the ones that are taking responsible for providing satisfactory content according to different regulations, different countries. So I think I didn't provide a very good advice for developing countries in that sense, but I think the complexities in the field are daunting, and of course we should aim at having the best technology possible when you have a gap, to try to skip steps and go towards what's more developed, because that will probably provide a better return in the longer term.
Okay, just before we break please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. SG9 also trying to facilitate to solve the problem or issue raised by the developing countries in terms of, particularly in terms of the deployment of the cable TV infrastructure. And now we are collecting their situation or their problem or their request. And now we are developing the implementation guideline, taking advantage of the existing ITU recommendation or J3 recommendation. And also we are developing the open platform to take advantage of the existing national infrastructure to be open to the upper layer service providers. And also we are now developing the set-top box recommendations, which is compatible with the terrestrial, satellite, and also cable, very universal set-top box to receive the broadcasting with low cost. So anyway, we are now aggressively trying to support the developing countries' deployment of cable television. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Is there a report on that, or should there be more work done with ITUD or something?
Currently, all of them are still under development, and we are now having collaboration with ITUD, the Group 1.
Okay, so just before we go to coffee, could I just ask each of the panelists to... Oh, sorry, Stefano, you have a question.
Perhaps an information, just to, let's say, continue the information given by the chairman of Study Group 9. So this work, which is specifically done by Study Group 9 for developing countries, is done by Question 4 in the Study Group 9. And this workshop is in parallel with Study Group 9, or back-to-back. And actually, as we end up with the workshop now at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, the question work of the Study Group 9 continues. And the specific work on the developing countries by Question 4 will have a session today in session 4, starting at 3:45. So I'm sure that the chairman is very happy to invite any expert that is even not a member and is present here to have a look of what kind of discussion is taking place in Question 4 this afternoon.
So that's after coffee this afternoon?
This will be the following session after coffee. The first one starts at 2:30, and the fourth one starts at 3:45.
4:15.
Oh, sorry, 4:15.
4:15.
There is a coffee break between 3:45 and 4:15.
Follow the discussions on systems for developing countries.
Exactly.
Okay, just before we break for coffee, I wanted to ask all of the panelists for a sort of one sentence, or if they would be so kind, what would be the main message they think should be carried away by the delegates at this conference about cable networks? You know, is it the future is bright or whatever it is? And maybe I just start with Paolo. Could you give us one or two sentences about what you think the main message for cable TV today is?
It's a very interesting point of view. I think cable is at the forefront of the digitalization process. I believe we have an opportunity that we shouldn't waste. I think if we look in a wider sense for the ICT sector, I believe that everything that we are contributing at this moment enables us to think about various different business models. And this is an opportunity that we shouldn't waste by just focusing on small issues, and we should look at the larger picture to what we could do. I think there are many opportunities for collaboration between the traditional I would say, partners in this business, content providers, content distributors, and others. So I think we should be clever on how we play this movement.
So the current technology opens the door to many new opportunities. We should reach out and grab them. Simao, how about you?
Yes, I would say that accessibility brings many opportunities. We're talking, when I say that, I'm asking you to think beyond just audio description, subtitles, and you're thinking of bringing new services using cable platforms, more advanced platforms. So think of the user interfaces, the difficulties of the users, how daunting that will be, and having accessible offers will put you in a much better position to compete with other services. So think of that. Think also in terms of the developing countries and the percentages of persons with disabilities there. That the accessible services will bring also openings in that direction. So think outside of the box, inclusive from the beginning of the design. Thank you.
So access services are not just something to help people with disabilities, but they open a whole new box of opportunities and may involve more revenue, whatever. So that's the point, is to take accessibility so seriously. How about Miyaji-san? Do you have a sort of sentence or two that you think?
Okay, so cable TV has a very long history. So sometimes people may say or consider that cable TV is a legacy or classic infrastructure. But I believe that the cable TV has a great potential to continue to grow and evolve by developing so many additional technologies. So I believe that there should be so many opportunity to enhance the cable TV related business.
Okay, so take advantage of the opportunities that are offered to help or develop cable networks, and there's an awful lot you can do with them. Thanks. Peter, how about you? What's your message from this session?
The transition for IP is happening. Jump on the bandwagon.
Okay. Well, with that, ladies and gentlemen, if you agree, we'll have a coffee break now until would 12:05 be all right? Or yes. So please be back here for our next session, ladies and gentlemen, at 12:05 and no later. So the session is adjourned. Thank you very much for attending.
Maybe just some housekeeping. So we are used to the coffee break offered outside. That's not the case today. So for today, coffee is self-served. This interesting event that we had today and yesterday here in ITU. So I just wish to remind you that this was a joint event organized by the standardization sector and the development sector. And that was very helpful, so that we were able to have a multidisciplinary audience as well as speakers. And the session one saw high-level regulators. I think it was the top one regulators from Europe that were speaking in for some countries of Europe, of course, that were speaking in the session one. And we had also a keynote from Cable Europe. Then we had an interesting session 2 on market trends and business models, and we went over to the innovation in session 3. What I retained from session 3 was one of the slides from David, which is here, which spoke about 4K, 8K, then 16K, 32K, 64K. So the future innovation, we don't know where we go, and that was very nice. Then we had the session for today, which was more specific on standardization for the cable TV, and we just concluded with that session. So let me remind you that this workshop had a background paper on industry trends, which was developed by Peter here on my right, which is an ITU expert, as you know, and on that paper let's say the role of that paper was to brainstorm a little bit on what this workshop would could bring as a value and as an outcome. In fact, the paper also highlighted a number of questions. We had 13 questions on the paper, and maybe at this event we found that could be other questions that needed to be answered, but we will see now. So the idea is to update this paper after this event, to try to give some answer if it's possible, but in any case to make it more comprehensive, and then republish it. So in order to do so, we would value this last session. We have time until 1 in principle to discuss, but we'll see whether we need to go until 1. I don't think we should go over that, so we try to be quick, and I would like to turn now over the floor to Peter to introduce us a little bit on this way forward. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Stefano. So there are 13 questions in total. I have 4 slides. And the first slide is addressing the wider issue if there is a future for cable TV. And then the second slide is more about the services and business models that we could apply for cable TV in Europe, but also elsewhere. And the third slide is more on the technology, and the last slide addresses questions on regulations and standardization. So if we start with question number 1, which is a wide question, and you could read it as what cable TV operators should do to improve their competitive stance in the converged marketplace. As we have seen, cable TV offerings are part of a converged offering, and which integrates with mobile and other services, also IoT. That is also what we have seen. And we asked this question, especially considering the now much discussed rise of OTT providers like Netflix. So what is it that we should do to improve our future? Now, I have listened to all these presentations, and I have heard some general ideas that were in common, and one of them is that we should consolidate as a cable market. We should consolidate, and this consolidation was needed to invest in the infrastructure, because we need more and more bandwidth. And now it is 8K, and perhaps it will end up at 128K. So that was one of the things that I found, that now there is a need for consolidation. And also the role of the cable company was stressed as a content aggregator. And part of that would be to integrate now offerings of Netflix. If you like, the cable company could be the portal to all sorts of content, including that of Netflix. And another thing that I heard was, now we should move away from network-centric thinking, that we have the delivery of television and data, to a more consumer-centric thinking, where the service and the consumer is central in what we do. So that was my understanding of what we should do, but perhaps there are different opinions on that.
So the floor is open for any comment on those outcomes from Peter, or additional outcome that we can add. Is open for the audience, is open for the panelists. Anyone wish to add something, or was the recap from Peter good enough, comprehensive? Please, David.
Of course, Peter described the discussion well. The question of what should cable operators do now? Yeah, I guess cable networks have a quandary, don't they, as to whether it is good value to invest in new infrastructure of the cable network, or is the broadband, including 5G and so on, going to overtake all that? And is the investment not going to be worth anything in 5 years' time? So it's a very difficult management issue for cable operators, and some quite difficult decisions. You know, of course, we love DVB-C2, but the reality is that it's been not much used in Europe because the cable operators don't know whether they should invest in this, because they don't know how far broadband IP systems are going to overtake cable. So they're there in the middle with this question. I don't know what the answer is, but I have a feeling that the key must be content aggregation, as you rightly said. That's the only way that I can see forward for them to protect their investment, to provide services which combine the main OTT services as well. So if there were votes on what the management should do, it would be, swallow hard and go for content aggregation, because you can either do that or probably not survive. Thank you.
Yeah, if I may add to that, because we have been looking at subscriber numbers of cable now in the US, in Europe and elsewhere, and there we see the trend that now the number of subscribers, we're doing okay. Now in terms of viewing, linear TV viewing, we also do okay, but I was wondering in revenues and where those revenues sit, because the title of this workshop is Cable TV, and that is linear TV services, to my opinion. But I wonder if it is really television services where the money sits. Is cable not investing in all this infrastructure just to provide broadband services rather than television services? So if you would look at that ARPU and that we have been discussing, we should really drill down a little bit further and see where the value really sits. And then I think that cable is a broadband provider, and they're doing very well, because we have seen that as well, that now the quality of providing high-speed bandwidth on cable is very good. That's perhaps better, and my understanding is that it is even better for IPTV networks. So I think you're investing in broadband if you invest in cable companies.
Yes, please, Simon.
Maybe one component you should not overlook is the going to the comment or just being content aggregators, but also local operators, smaller operators, might have a differentiating factor if they are able to produce local content, locally relevant content. That also can make a differentiation to attracting consumers to use their services rather than going to OTTs that are probably providing some content, but that is not locally relevant. I mean, the news and what's going on in your community. So that aspect could also facilitate the survival of operators, especially the smaller ones. That may not make a difference for the larger operators in certain contexts, but in many developing countries you have a huge, I think you saw in the presentation from El Salvador, that had that component of lots of smaller content providers or network operators, cable operators delivering content. So that's a differentiating factor, stimulating consumption of their content, or they're using them as a platform rather than other ones. Thank you.
Yeah, I fully agree with that, and perhaps I should add that really local content requirement is very important, even in Europe, because there is a new directive on that we want 30% EU-produced content, but also in other countries. Now, I've been with Istvan in Thailand, and Thailand, they value their culture very highly. So there is a strong focus on producing content, and that is even embedded in their regulation. Another country I've been is Bhutan. Bhutan sits in between China and India. They're very worried about their culture. And there is also a very strong focus on having local content available. And I think that is indeed something that cable can provide over, now, for example, satellite. Yeah. Yep.
Okay, in terms of investment, I remember in the keynote presentation from Matthias Kurt, I guess he said that the innovation done by the cable operator in Europe was fundamental, was playing a key role to have the incumbent investing to upgrade their networks in the broadband. So I see that the question here is, will the cable operator continue investing, because coming up the 5G and the other technologies for the broadband of the incumbent, maybe, let's say, they don't see anymore this return of investment. This, I think, what I get from David's comment. I thought that Matthias Kurt, he was more positive in that sense, that he felt that investment will continue for the cable operators. That's what I felt, but I think your statement is very fair. Yeah.
Well, if I was wrong, Mr. Chairman, you have DVB-C2 widespread use throughout Europe, which it isn't. We're stuck with DVB-C, the old system, 15 years old, because they're not sure whether the investment is going to be worth it in an age when broadband IP may take over the store. There's nobody French in the room, I hope. But anyway, I was speaking to one of the senior people from French television recently, and I asked him, how do you decide what's going to happen in France in the future? He said, it's very easy. We look at what's happening in the United States. That's what will happen in France in 10 years' time. So, you can see these sort of doubts, can't you, that might might plague the management of cable networks. But somehow they have to find the courage to move forward, because that's the only way to survive.
Thank you, David. Can we consider concluded the outcome from the question one? Would you want to move forward?
We can move forward. I think the next question is, the first question was what can the industry do, and question two is now the wider question of what can regulators, national regulatory authorities or regulators and international industry bodies do to help to combat the challenges of the cable TV industry. Now, I found in the workshop some couple of things, and I would say that the history of regulating cable is changing. I think in the past, regulators had a stance that cable companies are monopolies, and we have to protect consumers. And now, standard item in any telecommunication law in the past was cable industry and what is the position of cable companies. And I think what I understood from the workshop is that view is changing. And now it is not changing like, now this cable company is a monopolist, but we should help them to invest, and we allow them to work and together. And I've heard the word co-investment several times, so that they can now together invest in providing this infrastructure, this broadband infrastructure that is needed, and also the promotion of site sharing or infrastructure sharing. So there are, to me, elements in the regulatory world that we should support cable companies rather than seeing them as the enemy, if you like. I think that is a view that is changing, and that means that co-investment is allowed. And now most recently we see also the regulation on net neutrality changing, and this is something that we haven't discussed really, net neutrality. But perhaps you're aware that in the US recently the FCC changed their view on net neutrality. And in my view, that is also to help cable companies to invest in infrastructure.
The floor is open for any comment.
Could you elaborate a bit more on how net neutrality helps cable companies? I must admit, I didn't quite follow that.
No, it is like that net neutrality rule says that if you're simply put, if you're a network operator and you're also a service provider, then to third-party service providers you should provide broadband access or network access against the same terms and conditions. And in Europe, and especially in the country where I'm from, the Netherlands, is that there should be no interference of cable companies or network operators in network management. In the US, it was different, that you can do network management to deliver a good quality of service between the different services, and now they want to leave it all open, how network operators do network management, and that could mean blocking and reducing the speed of third-party service providers. So, and that to me is now an open door to reduce the bandwidth of Netflix, for example. So net neutrality can help network operators to protect their investment if you relax those rules.
Any other view? Okay, so we move to the next question.
Wow.
Please, Peter.
So this is a slide on service and business models. And the first, thank you. So the first question is that OTT delivered services are now, to my understanding, perceived by consumers to be on par, so with the same quality of service than now cable companies or IPTV network operators deliver. So in the past, there was a unique selling point to say, now my quality of service, video quality and reliability on my network is better than when it is provided over OTT. I think that is a position that you can't hold any longer, because I think the consumer sees no difference whether it is watching a video service over an OTT on an OTT way, or in a walled garden, if you like, on IPTV or cable infrastructure. So is there still a unique selling point in having your own infrastructure where you have full control over the network management parameters? And I think no.
Mr. Chairman, doesn't this, I mean, I'm not sure that you can universally say this for every country in the world, if I may.
For Europe?
Well, even for Europe, we have a second home in the Wye Valley in the UK, where the, I'm watching iPlayer or something, and suddenly it all goes upside down and blah blah blah, because the connection, the internet delivery is unreliable. But on the other hand, if I use an IPTV service there, I do get consistent quality. So I think you could say that there would be places where this would be true, but I'm not sure that it's universally applicable across everywhere, and probably not at all applicable, outside the developed world. But
agree.
Thanks, David. It's a good comment. There was a request from the floor. I think the delegate from Togo, is it correct? Gambia, please. Sorry. Go ahead, please. Open up. Yes, please.
I think on question 3, for Africa especially, this may not hold for in the near future. Maybe in coming with development of broadband or high-speed broadband. For now, we still depend on, I think, the conventional form of television broadcasting. But because the internet is still, broadband is still a challenge for most of us, and OTT services are available, but the quality content is interrupted because of the low broadband speed. So for now, I think for our part, we are not ready for question 3. There's still a far way to go before we can achieve that level of consumer experience, if I may say.
Yeah. Thank you. I think this was in line with David. Yeah, please. Please, can you identify yourself, please?
Ahmed Solati, CEO of Qatar National Broadband Network. I think when we talk about the network and how it's difficult to provide dedicated network for each provider, I think the right model or the ideal model today in the countries where we have the national broadband network, which is we are not operator, and we are not competing even with the operators, and we are providing only the passive network, shareable network. So if we have such infrastructure, it's easy to provide the needed network for the TV with affordable price, because this connectivity is not only dedicated for the services. It's a dark fiber for the TV, which is fiber to the home, and the same time with the same cable we are giving also that for other services for other operators. So we are giving the affordable network, and this is the model where you can reduce and sharing the cost of civil work between different service providers for IPTV and smart solution, electricity meters, water meters, all that under one network, where we can give affordable price and give the choice for the customer to use, to share, to choose between the operator or TV providers. In this model, you can also go only as TV provider, and easy to switch on and off between the customers without that big cost of infrastructure. And for today in our model, if you ask today for a dark fiber for X home as FTTH, I can give you today. And if the customer not happy, I can switch it off tomorrow, because in any way I am providing this for several services and not only specifically for you. Yeah. Maybe this is the ideal model where we can help the TV network and the TV cable to provide affordable price without investing in such infrastructure.
Yeah. Just I have you from Qatar, sir. Qatar. Yeah. I have a question, because what I understand, that is Qatar government and government money is providing a nationwide fiber network for everyone to access. This idea of having a nationwide fiber network, that is not new. Yeah, and in my country, it was in the Netherlands.
This is NBN concept.
My question is, that was tried in the Netherlands. It failed. In the end, the government said, no, this is something for the market to pick up. What is it that you were successful in doing that in Qatar?
Actually, when we start this company, we captured some part of the motive from Singapore and from what's happened in Australia at that time. And today, based on what dark fiber we are providing, we are not getting any more money from the government. We break even in 2016, and we are providing now only a dark fiber without any active services. So we already now we are covering our operation, and we are getting more money now. It's big growth, and for 2018 we covering our project by our company. We almost and now we come under the Qatar Invest company, which is almost semi government, but not 100%. And we are working with as independent company owned by the government, but we are not getting any support from the government anymore. So we already in a good stable cash, and we are getting that by providing the dark fiber for some operators and for some governments and for some security. So no more money coming. We are getting from the government. So after that break even, we are continuing as like private. So I think it's a good model.
So public-private partnership somewhere. In the beginning there was public money, later on private. Okay.
Well, still public, he said, but not needed.
Yeah, now in later stages it switched to private operations, commercial.
Yes, the idea to open the shares later for the private sector to be a part of it.
Right. Was a different business model that works, so worth to mention.
Yeah. Okay.
I guess there was another question. Okay, maybe. Do you still want to talk? No. So the gentleman from El Salvador, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Wall. I just want to ask you if you can amplify a little why the situation in Netherlands didn't work as in Qatar. What the reason were?
No, I think that is politics.
No.
I think there's no other explanation. The politician felt that this was not something for the government to pick up. I think this is a long time ago. I think this is about 20 years ago. And then the politics was everything should be private. So it's just the political climate was not there to provide. Don't forget that in the Netherlands, cable networks were deployed by government money and then all sold off. And because now it is Ziggo, Vodafone, it's all private money now. So this was completely against the trend of the political thinking at that time. So.
Okay, is there any more views that you wish to express? Otherwise, let's move to the question 4.
Yes, so there are basically 2 questions. And that is is there a need, or should we really have an integrated service offering, so that is combining with mobile? I think that was a clear answer in the workshop. Yes, we should not forget that this is part of a mobile service offering, and I have also heard that we should now consider the Internet of Things. I've seen e-health, now smart cities. So it is part of an integrated service offering. And now the second part of this question 4 is if linear TV will remain a key element in this service offering. And on the basis of linear TV offering, you can also offer video on demand services like catch-up TV. Now, I think that my understanding is that there were some clear presentations where we said, no, linear TV is not that at all. I think the last of Peter of the DVB project was very clear. It's going strong, linear TV, especially in the EU, and we should not throw that away. This is if you like, content is still king. Don't throw that away, and build on the basis of this linear TV offering other services like now catch-up TV. And now we can discuss in more depth, but I think that we should go a little bit further in that of media meshing, is that we, now the second screen development, now very often it is used to retain customers, but do we really generate extra revenues by offering all these second screen offerings? To me that is still very limited.
Any view wish to express about the offering, linear TV versus video on demand, and other? Please, from El Salvador.
Yes, from my point, I think the business model has to be, I mean, it has a strong relation with the cultural things of every country. At least in our region, we are very far away from VOD. I don't think those small companies are going to have any revenue from VOD, and the linear television is the strongest part. Besides that, the broadband services, that's what they are. In some form, this is the part that is giving them the power, to be on the market. They migrate to FTTH because it wasn't a special reason in the region. They were still in the copper cable, so they had to migrate to fiber optics. They didn't even know the potential of the cable, of the fiber optics. But given broadband, this is what is impulsing the model, the market, and the business model. But no VOD, at least for, I think, maybe 5 years from now, maybe. but not.
And why is that? Is because that is the infrastructure is missing in El Salvador, or is that people just don't want it? Inherent demand that's not there.
I will say that this is a cultural thing. You know, it had to be. They operate mostly in the countryside, small ones. We have 21,000 square kilometers. We have 60 small companies working on the countryside.
60, sorry?
60 cable companies.
Oh, small cable.
Working in the countryside. So I would say their market is the countryside people. So because of they are not people with enough, I would say, knowledge about VOD. It will be difficult to go into that.
I understand. Yeah.
Yeah, so cultural differences provide this kind of change. I remember in the slide from Mr. Valente, there was a nice, let's say, age-related way of addressing the content. I remember the young would use mobile phone and a smartphone, etc., or going up email to communicate. Was a way to communicate, and then the old one would not even text, would just pick up the phone all the way. So perhaps this is a way also to see differences in countries, in the development of the country itself for the infrastructure. But I guess sooner or later, those services will also enter in those other cultures. So we are talking about the future here, so we need to take also that into consideration. But not every country is probably ready for those.
Yeah.
So is there any other view? I remember about linear TV, it was said that was mainly accessed from home, while all the other services would be more mobile. That you would not access a linear TV channel from a mobile device. Normally you do it from your TV set at home. I remember that was said.
Yes,
it's not in contradiction of what you said. It was just a consideration that the users would not tend to access linear services, even though they might have a linear TV on a mobile phone. They don't watch that unless it's a game, a football game that is going on somewhere in the world. Then you do that. Otherwise, probably it's for time. You don't stay there for a long time to watch, but use mobile phone for quicker.
Yeah, that was in my presentation.
Was it yours? Okay. I'm quoting you. Okay. Any other view, please?
I wonder if this situation is really as simple as saying, will linear TV remain a key element based on which also VOD services can be developed? Because I think the old folklore until a few years ago was that linear TV would be the thing that you would use for events and what was called the shared experience, the news, the events, the sports, and so on, and that if there was a place for VOD services, it might be lying more in terms of drama. But things are changing because the VOD service operators are buying sports events, the things that were regarded traditionally as exactly the right things for linear TV services, and they are making their own local content. As somebody said earlier, this is critical to have local content, but Netflix and so on and the others are spending millions on drama. So it may be not simply a question of linear TV versus VOD, but who's running the show? Is it going to be Netflix doing both linear TV and VOD via broadband, and broadcasters or cable operators just providing linear TV? Anyway, I know I confused you a lot there, but my thought is that it's not as simple as I think that question says, and it is getting more complicated.
If I may respond to that, I agree. But also the Netflix, in the end, they're either doing linear TV or video on demand. It is just a different player. And Is it not that people, that the world is becoming one big place and that we all enjoy more the same type of content? And then, because now in Brazil they're watching a Netflix series, in the Netherlands they're watching the same Netflix series, and they can communicate and talk about it. So if there is more common content, then and you believe that content is king, now then to survive you need the best content in the world, and not in Europe or in El Salvador. You need the best content in the world, and then it is just scale. If you're very big, like Netflix, then you can spend, what was it, 4 billion, 8 billion US dollars in content, and then you attract the audience. So is it that because of internationalization of audiences that it is a scale game?
Are you happy with that situation? Is that good for humanity?
No, yeah, that is more, I would say that's more my private opinion. I think that is not good. And I can feel for countries, like I said, in Thailand and Bhutan, that we should nurture local content, local culture, because that makes life richer.
Yes. But they make the best soap operas in Brazil, actually, if you're interested in that. Fact. Simao will confirm.
Now I live in Brasilia, so I watch sometimes a little bit of Brazilian content.
I remember even in Italy when I was younger, many soap operas used to come from Brazil. Of course, duly translated in Italian.
I can say Mauritius as well.
Mauritius. So we all agree with you, David. Okay, can we move on next question?
Yeah, that's milking linear TV a little bit further, and that is more from the behavioral perspective. Often you hear people saying that, now, my kids are not watching linear TV services anymore. They only do Netflix, YouTube. But what does that say about the future? And that is what is in question 5. These children of us, they become older, and then they will have children. And then when they are having a hard day at work and they've put the kids to bed, and then they say, poof, now I want to relax, and they're going to sit down on the television, in front of the television. Is it then that they want to be entertained, or they're carrying on what they did when they were young, and now going through all the YouTube films and selecting what you like to see? Is that young generation of now continuing to behave like they do now, or will that change when they become older and have kids, and then in the evening they're tired and they just want to be entertained? And I think the strength of broadcaster is that they've been doing that for years, to think about what audience would like to see and how to produce good content. So that is question 5. Is this what we say of youngsters now not watching linear TV? Will that continue when they're older? I doubt. Any views on that?
Satoshi-san, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If we talk about the younger people, whether or not younger people will watch the linear TV or not, I think they will. But they will not the linear TV on the TV screen. They will. Because OTT-based linear TV providers are getting popular, such as Amazon channels, YouTube TVs, and this is very limited within Asian countries like Japan, Taiwan. But there is some linear TV, famous linear TV provider like a Showroom and M17 or something like that. So depending on the content characteristics, for example, live event transmission or sport event, younger people, even younger people also will watch the linear TV, but on the tablet or mobile screen, online as online video, but not the TV screen. So when it comes to the linear TV or not, they will. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Any other view? Will the young people, when they get old, watch linear TV? or not, because they don't do that now.
I suppose that, just imagining here, that the greatest advantage is also the greatest weakness of the linear TV, which is you don't need to choose. So if you're really thinking about, you have a channel, linear TV, that has a certain theme that attracts you, could be news, right? That's one theme, but other themes like History Channel or some other channels like that, that are providing content on a certain theme, and you don't want to choose, you just want to take it and relax, for example, then yeah, consumption could be viable. You know, if you have other channels, then you know, how many times we go to Netflix or other provider, you can now choose the content you're going to watch, and then you spend there, I don't know about you, but in my family, some time, like half an hour, choosing what you're going to watch.
Yeah.
And if you just want to relax, you just spend to half an hour not relaxing. So, so maybe there is a value proposition to linear TV, which is the simplicity model that facilitates the consumption, and that could be attractive for others. Depends on what you want to do.
Please, David. I just want to associate to Simao. I have a similar experience. It actually happened to me sometime in the evening with my wife. When it's already late. It's like 9:30. You normally sleep 10:30. We say, "Would we watch a movie tonight? Yeah, let's see what we can choose from the video on demand." Yeah. So we go there, and then after half an hour, we say, well, "It's getting late. It's too late. Let's go to sleep." So our evening was looking what the serving offerings were, and then we didn't watch anything. But on the other side, when we switch on the linear one, then there is a movie. Even if sometimes you have seen it before, and you say, "Oh, that was nice," but you could have chosen it anytime you wanted on the video. You never did it, but on the linear TV you watch it. So I really share that experience with you. Please, David, for you.
I was just wondering if in Simao's households that half hour is spent choosing between Brazilian soap operas. But no, I mean, there's this, a line in the Bible, excuse me, about when I was a child, I acted as a child, wasn't there? And when I was a man, I did other things. So I'm personally convinced that linear TV is not dead, and that the older you get, the more you want to relax and be entertained. Because when you're young, psychologically, you're searching for your identity, you're looking around, where do I fit, in what way, and all this is much easier with social networks and internet-delivered services. But when you know who you are, when you get older, then essentially you want somebody to tell you a story, you want to be entertained. So I'm convinced that linear TV is not dead. Incidentally, there was a study in Switzerland. I think the situation is that by 2050, half the population of Switzerland will be 60 or over. So the real growth area for audience is actually elderly people, isn't it? And really, we shouldn't forget this. When we talk about new tools and so on, the generation Z is going to be the 50% of the country, which is people who are retired. Anyway, I'm very much of the view that linear TV is not dead. Thank you.
Well, I would say that we can move on with the next question. Please, question 6.
Okay, question 5 is, I think that we have addressed that in the workshop as well, is that now the OTT providers are seeking collaboration with the cable companies. Now, and the question 6 is really, are these OTT providers now merely seeking market access by accessing the ecosystem of the cable TV operator, or is it something else that they're after? Or another way to say, if you allow Netflix into your cable offering, are you then not taking in the enemy? And you may regret that later. So what is the value proposition of cable companies allowing that to include Netflix in their offering, or another OTT service provider? Is that going to be beneficial for both of them, or just for one of them? And that brings in that comes back to is the role of the cable company really the content aggregator? Is that enough to survive?
Please, from El Salvador.
I would say there is more of an advantage for the Netflix than for the cable operator. I think this is the same thing when the telecommunication operator, the big one, that's the how do you call it, the incumbent, is providing television, cable television. That is not the big issue for them. It's not the big business for them. But they use the network as the best way to go into the potential digital consumer. They go to the small village, they put the television for $10 in order to go into the house, use the TV to start bombarding, the potential customer with everything they want, because they want that people to start buying and consuming other things, not television. So I think in the case of Netflix, it's going to be the same thing. Netflix is going very fast, spending a lot of money. But at the end, I think the winner is Netflix, not the cable itself.
Do we have an answer for this question? So it seems that it's mainly the OTT provider that take advantage of it. Can we move to the next question? Oh, Satoshi-san, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, from the OTT's point of view, the cable TV network is a really attractive, high-speed or smooth highway to reach the customers. So if the cable TV operator just accepts such situation, cable TV operator will be just a dumb pipe.
Yeah.
But cable TV has a strong customer contact. They have a huge customer base. So the sharing some marketing data with OTT is, I think, necessary for the cable TV operator if they provide the OTT on their network. So people is just wanting to use the OTT service. So there are so many users' behavior expected on the OTT services. And marketing data will be generated through such users' behavior. So this is actually a business issue between OTT and the cable TV operator, but to possible extent, such marketing data should be shared between the OTT and the cable TV operators. And if the cable TV operator is able to use such marketing data for providing the other services than OTT, it should be useful for the cable TV business. That's my opinion. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So, to be a content aggregator, if I may add to that, I think that you have to be excellent in customer experience. And to my view, cable companies still need to catch up with the Netflix. The Netflix consumer experience is better, to my view, than what I know. I live in Brasilia, and there we have Netje, and I find the experience, and Netje is not small, it's a big cable company. That experience is more difficult than with Netflix. So a content aggregator, yes, but then you must be excellent in customer experience. And I think so that is somewhere where we, as a cable industry, still need to learn. That is.
Okay, no idea. I think we can move to the next question. Question 7.
That's on the. It's more on the technology, and question 7 is now we now have hybrid networks as cable companies, and now we know that the local loop is really the bottleneck, And is it now necessary for cable companies to replace the local loop with fiber? And of course that is now correlated by the forecasted demand. And now we have seen ultra high definition 4K, 8K is driving a demand for broadband. So the question here, is there now a need for, in the medium term, for cable companies to make their whole network fiber-based, also in the local loop, or there is no need for that, and we will carry on with this hybrid configuration for the next 5 to 10 years. And my understanding from the workshop is that it is not clear to me. Some people I hear we need 10 gigabit in per household. Some people say no, that is too much. So DOCSIS 3.1 is 10 gigabit download speed. Is that needed? So do we need fiber in the local loop?
The floor is open. So is it worth to invest, I guess? This is the question.
Yeah.
We come back a little bit on what we discussed already on the question 1. Is there anything we can add? Is it worth to invest for the cable operators to improve their current infrastructure? Please, David.
Mr. Chairman, if I knew the answer to this question, I'd be out at the stock exchange making an awful lot of money.
Yeah.
This is one of the $64 questions, isn't it, for cable operators? I'm not sure what the answer is, to be frank, but well, one can say that it's a very difficult question.
Okay. Well, if we everyone agree that there is no answer we can give to this question, I think we can move forward.
That's quick, yeah. Okay, question 8. And that is about network architecture. There is a clear development that networks are going to be more and more software based. And then it is a logical conclusion that now perhaps it should be system integrators that should run networks and not cable companies. And now if you see that your core business is content aggregation, then owning and running a network is secondary to you. So can we expect that cable companies will outsource their network operations and perhaps including the assets to third parties? And are that not different parties than we see today that are the system integrators in this world that will now run the network operations? Because it is a configuration of different networks, and then you have to tie up all these networks together, and that needs a lot of system integration skills. So question 8 is, do you still need to run your own network, or do you outsource that to third parties?
Any view on this question?
Yeah. No. I think that that the system integrators, the big companies, will move into this area. Because if we really want to deliver video and all other services over multiple platforms, there is a lot of system integration involved. And if you say on top of that, that your core business is content aggregation, now don't spend your money on running that complicated network.
Can we put that as an outcome from the event?
Difficult question.
It's a difficult question, I agree.
Well, I would say that, like the previous question, the answer is it depends. It's a possibility, but depends on what makes sense economically for you, your size, what kind of technology you're putting there. So I guess how you get there, what's your path towards from where we started until we start from a very small provider, cooperative type, and then evolve into something bigger. What's your path? And I guess different moments. And certainly this is an answer to very large and complex organizations, but not necessarily to all. But I guess it's the same answer to question 7.
Okay.
There may be a different view. Can you identify yourself?
Matthias Thies with Ofcom regulator. I just want to add, the whole questionnaire is a little bit in the scope of integrated service provider that the cable operator is. And that is also the case in Switzerland with the big companies. But nonetheless, we have cable operators, one specifically that I was discussing lately with, and he runs a cable network just with DVB-C service. And the DOCSIS is run by a different cable operator. So he makes his fortune on the local network, on electricity and water supply, and there is a way in surviving and because there was the question of surviving of the network and making money. And there are, on the other side, operators, they only do dark fibers, and they have their business as well. And where I see the network operators going forward in the same direction is that they're running more and more fiber up to the premises, up to the buildings and the homes. And on the other end, we have national-wide companies that start to outsource the local servicing of the network because they need to focus more and more on the services that also work OTT and worldwide, because the user expects the content and the services to work everywhere in the world, you know. And there is a trend, and they all can do that because they have the standards to rely on, and where they segment their business models in a new way, not integrated vertically, but they find their ways to separate horizontally. And that is where future standards have to be also usable in a way that they can be used to really segment in a horizontal way. Whether that is the case for every country, that this is the right model, that is not the question. It's just a question: is a possibility there? And it was interesting for me to learn that somebody found a way in a cable to segment the services in DVB-C on one side and DOCSIS on the other side, and additional services, and pay TV in another part of the spectrum. So they got along, but I thought they had a hard time going into the standards and figuring out how they separated the frequencies and the spectrum. So I'd say it is not necessarily always the case, but I see already a trend that the integration is not really necessary in every situation, although it is a big trend with the big elephants in every country.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we have exhausted also question 8.
Yes.
We go forward.
I'm looking at the time. Is that?
We have still maybe 5-10 minutes.
5 minutes. Let's do the last question and 9. The other ones are on. I think that we covered that more or less. Let's see. And 9 is a simple question, and that is about DOCSIS 3.1 and DVB-C 2. Now they both provide similar and very efficient solutions for delivering high quality video and 4K, 8K, together with proper encoding. Is there a need for both, or should they be integrated? And I think to some extent they are already very integrated into each other. So is there still a need? And that I would say, is there still a need for DVB-C 2? And I have discussed this with Peter just after the session 4, and the answer was now it is DOCSIS 3.1, which is interesting for someone from the DVB project. Are there any different views on that? This is different from the terrestrial and the satellite platform where it is all DVB-T2 and S2, but for cable it seems to be stuck at DVB-C. And then just as a legacy system, and the way forward to me seems to be DOCSIS 3.0 and 3.1.
That was also my understanding from presentation of Peter. Is there any view? Can we move next question? Please.
I'm doing that on the wrong computer. Right. There are still many questions. Perhaps we should speed up a little bit. Let's see if we covered things of it already. This is something that we haven't addressed at all, and no, not sure. But you can consider a TV app on a Samsung or an LG television, smart television set as an ecosystem where content providers or service providers would like to have access to. Now, and that is about ecosystem access. Now, that is often a regulatory point of attention. Is there a need for regulators to step into this market so that people do have a sort of standardized or an open access to ecosystems? So should regulators step in, or we say no, there is enough. There is enough offering because there is no single party that can exercise market power, because there are many suppliers of smart TV sets and devices, and now standardization is enough. And to start, I think standardization is enough because the market is very fragmented. I think that regulators should stay away from this. They have a role in ex post conflict resolution, but not starting to regulate this.
So no regulation?
But standardization. Because
standardization,
that is
but not regulation. Yeah. Any different view? Okay, we move to the next one.
Wow. 11. Yeah. Net neutrality. Now, that was in the past. That was about network operators stopping certain services that would require a lot of bandwidth, and network operators now picking up the bill but not having the revenues. Now, that is a sort of discussion of the past that has now changed to zero rating offerings, whether that would be allowed. And here in question 11, now, if we believe that 848 and 128K will come, then we all know that that will eat up a lot of bandwidth. Will we get in the future new net neutrality issues so that network operators are indeed allowed to manage that service a little bit, so that they are not only picking up the bill and the Netflix or the OTT service providers having all the advantages? So can we foresee new net neutrality conflicts in the future because of this high quality video delivery?
That's a difficult question, I guess. Also at this time, probably, before lunch.
Yeah. I think we will, anyway. Because I think that encoding, which is very important, that we exhausted that quite a bit. So my guess is that we will get troubles here, and especially if this trend carries on, that we don't need broadcast platforms anymore, because that is a sort of sentiment in the market. So then we end up in a situation that we have mass market delivery of also linear TV on IP platforms, and then in combination with high quality of 128K and not so much progress in encoding technologies, then I think we will get problems.
Any different view? Any different view? Or we go ahead with that and we go on the next question, please.
Right. 12. Question 12. We're gonna wrap up. And this is about the Audiovisual Media Service Directive. That is a directive that is under revision. Now, if you look at that, there is now more attention to video on demand or non-linear content. Now, and if you look at what Parliament says about that, we also want local content requirements, and I guess the idea is to protect European culture, and one of the rules is that 30% of video on demand content should be EU produced. But what this really addresses, this question, is that now that is nice, but it is, if you look in the directive, that linear TV services are still more regulated than these video on demand services, and I think that the new revision doesn't go far enough. And it is the same now with local content requirements. There is a difference between now broadcasters offering linear TV services or now the OTT service provider. There is still a lighter regulatory regime for OTT providers. And here, I guess the position is it doesn't go far enough.
So the European Commission has a role to play. I think this was also in line with what the keynote said. Please, David.
Yes, the Media Services Directive is very important for us in the EBU. But when you say should rules be changed or removed, actually even the processes of changing this directive are horrendously long, Mr. Chairman. Do you know, I mean, the directive is really running about 5 or 10 years behind the technology. Yeah. They really have to work quicker. I mean, it's insane sometimes that that it all takes so long to do things in Europe. I don't know why. I mean, one of the things is that we would have liked to have had in the Advanced Media Services Directive, just to please Simao, of course, something that says if you broadcast subtitles on a TV program, you are obliged to provide the same subtitles on the internet delivered version. But trying to get even something as simple as that through, it's, as they say, like swimming in treacle, frankly. So I'd love the rules to be changed, to be updated, and to take account of what the situation is today. But I'm perhaps cautious about the ability of the European instances to move sufficiently quickly. I hope that's not too subversive a remark, Mr. Chairman.
Great.
Peter is also nodding. Any other view to be recorded? Otherwise, I think we're going to get to the last question.
Last question is about standardization. I think that we have addressed that, especially in the last session, session 4, we have addressed that. Is there anything missing in standardization? And I have picked up some elements. One of them was IP multicasting. That is that we should work a bit on that. I have also seen more on IBB, integrated broadband broadcasting, that was an area that we should spend some more attention to, but which I also understood in study group 9 was part of the future work. Correct me if I'm wrong. What else did I see? Service integration on the set-top box or on the PVR. That was another issue that we may need. In the study group 9, there was things like bridging standardization gaps, which was an open platform for TV program delivery. A common set-top box for cable, terrestrial, and satellite I saw. And also implementation guidelines, which is not entirely clear to me what that entails. But that were sort of standardization gaps that I picked up from the workshop.
It was one, maybe Simao would say something.
The accessibility, sorry. I missed that.
That's what I was going to say about that. To make it more evident, include where it's not included, but also make some things that will facilitate for example, if you have accessible procurement, the requirements for delivering products in a certain market to have things that are specific towards like conformance assessment that will certify against those requirements, in particular the accessibility. So those two elements. Thank you.
Okay, well noted. Thank you.
Any other comment? I guess the word, please, David.
Yes, are critical standards missing? Well, I think the problem is that we like standards very much, and that's why we have so many of them, Mr. Chairman. You have things like IBB, 4 different international standards, all doing very much the same thing. Why couldn't we have got these people together to just have one worldwide standard? So I think that the problem is for the world is that there are too many different bodies developing standards which are different, and somehow we need to try to move towards more convergence between what's happening in Europe and United States, for example, or Europe and Japan and so on, so that these people, such as people with disabilities, can benefit by having just a single worldwide system. So I'm not sure the issue is our critical standards missing. It there may be, but there's certainly an issue about the plurality of standards and our lack of ability to create unique worldwide standards. Thank you.
And I guess that was also mentioned in this line that collaboration among the standards body was critical and important, and was to be fostered as far as possible. I remember someone also mentioned that it's important to have the industry, the regulators, the government together. Let's say having a view on a standard to be developed which is going to be implemented by everyone, and not just going in a standard body to develop a standard without having that kind of consensus beforehand. Any other view, any other thing that we can add on this discussion on standards? If that we said will be implemented, we will be already very far ahead. So maybe something else we can add. You have any other closing remark you wish to say, Peter? You spoke.
No, I will incorporate all this feedback and all what we've discussed in the workshop in that industry paper which is available on the seminar website, and then we will republish that.
All right, so I think we are getting close to the end of this workshop, which was personally very useful and actually enriching. I was very pleased to collaborate with the BDT. I have to say that I'm very sorry that, even though I'm very pleased that Istvan is here with me representing BDT, but I'm very sorry that Jaroslav couldn't be here, because we put together a lot of energy and effort to put together this event. And you might not know, but he woke up with a high fever this morning. That's the reason why he's not here with us. But he sends his best regards, of course. So let me say this was very enriching, and was happy to collaborate with BDT. This event was specific for Europe, even though it had an international flavor. But Jaroslav is the head of the regional office for Europe, and that's why we managed to have here regulators from Europe and many European participants, which not traditionally participate in this study group 9. So this, let's say, multiverse stakeholders, multidisciplinary stakeholders, helped us to the success and see the cable TV, especially in Europe, from different viewpoints. And one of the outcomes I have from this event is that this kind of regional, let's say, targeted regional event is useful, and will be useful also for other regions of the world. And we have already discussed, because I received proposals from our delegates from Latin America, that a similar event would be important in Latin America. So we're going to work for that with the delegate from El Salvador. We spoke with the delegate of Mexico, but in the past we had delegates from Haiti and Argentina that also expressed the same view. So we start to have a critical mass of requests to have that kind of event in Latin America. We're looking forward to do something like that. We also spoke in the past to have a similar event in Africa, and this is also in our agenda, but we don't know when and how we will be implementing that. So it was a pleasure for me, and as I said, reaching. I hope that the participants also appreciate it. I wish to thank very much our sponsors, Skyward, that offered the reception, KDDI, and IHS Market from UK. Thank you very much for the support. And maybe just to close, I leave the word to Istvan from the BDT side. Thank you very much. Please.
Thank you very much, and it was also my pleasure. Although I couldn't stay too long for the meetings because I had to do also other things, but I wish to pass you also our appreciation that you came, and it was a pleasure working together with the TSB. Also, we approached the BR, but they are not directly working on this subject, but you saw that in a lot of presentation we mentioned the ITUR document, so I can say that this was also an experience of the One ITU activities, which we like very much. Just to call your attention also that in the ITU-D we have also a study group, which is a 2/1, which is dealing also with the broadcasting issues. So when we will have the first meeting of this study group, because it's the first after the WTDC, I will do a presentation about this workshop, and then just to pass the message that, of course, maybe lot of things are required, and we have to see also sometimes the need of the developing countries, because now we can speak about beautiful futures, but it's very difficult for them to access all these features that we have in the television. So thank you very much. I want to leave you to close it.
Okay, thank you. But as a last word, let me thank all the speakers and especially all the moderators. Two of them are not here. Yaroslav, I said. I think Mr. Byrne from the session 2 is not here, but I have pleasure to hear David Wood, that is a worldwide expert, at least from the ITU side. We know him very well, and we appreciate a lot his support for this event with a very nice presentation and excellent moderation as usual. And also Istvan, of course, that helped us with the moderation. So thank you very much to speakers, to moderators, and thank you all participants for staying here with us.
And thank you for all the organizing team. Let's give them a round of applause.
I shouldn't forget Roisin, that is there on the left side, sorry, because she was really instrumental to put together this event. I'm sure all the speakers know her very, very well, with an enormous amount of emails, exchanges, etc., etc. Okay, and Anna Maria, that is not here now, but is my colleague from the workshop team that also supported us a lot.
And the interpreters.
There are no interpreters this time to thank. All right, thanks a lot. So please, the delegate from Mexico would like to have the floor, please.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I just wanted to thank you for the possibility, for the opportunity to participate for us, and to congratulate you for this initiative, which I think it is extremely important, and will be also, as you were mentioning, for the regional applications. Thank you very much, and I expect to be in contact with you. We expect to be in contact with you in order to examine the possibility to have this kind of workshop in our region. Thank you very much. Have a nice day.
Thank you very much. I expect a lot of collaboration from our colleagues from BDT on that. I forgot to mention that, but I already have plans to talk to Istvan and to perhaps the regional office in Brasilia to organize that event. So you will certainly hear from us. Thank you very much. So the workshop is closed.
Okay. Thank you.
Peter.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. It was great.
Thank you. Good to see you. No, I haven't changed. Exactly the same.
Yeah, I don't have a card, I'm sorry. But you have my contacts through the website.
So you live in Brasilia?
Yeah, my wife is Brazilian, so that is why.